Good morning and welcome to the Infrastructure Committee for the last meeting of this particular session. We'll be going to recess this week. I want to provide a quick overview of today's business. Committee will receive oral evidence from Peter McReynolds MLA on his tree protection bill, receive oral evidence from Paula Bradshaw MLA on her display of flags and emblems bill, consider a draft timetable in relation to the committee stage for the Harbours Bill, consider 3 SLs for statutory rule that are not subject to assembly procedure, 1 SR that is not subject to assembly procedure, consider the draft report in relation to the committee's scrutiny of the Water, Sustainable Drainage and Flood Management Bill, and consider the draft report of the review of regionally significant developments and judicial reviews. Those in the public gallery are very welcome. Just to remind you that you can use mobile phones, but you should not take any photographs or recordings of the proceedings. If members are all content, we will crack on. Are there any apologies that we're aware of? I don't think so. Declarations of interest. Just to remind members, they can declare interest at any point. Most members have already declared interest, but if something comes up that you feel you should declare, please do that at that point. In terms of Chair's business, just to remind members that there's an event by the Wastewater Infrastructure Group at 1:30 today, and I'll be making some introductory remarks at that meeting, and they are launching a report entitled The Cost of Doing Nothing, which is really talking about our wastewater infrastructure. Also, just to make members aware that I met with the CMA in the context of a recent civil engineering market study. The report has 19 recommendations, most of which have direct relevance to Northern Ireland. And on that, I would just need to seek committee agreement to ask the Department for a response to the recommendations contained in the CMA report. Do I have committee agreement to do that? At item 4, we have the draft minutes. At page 7 are the draft minutes of proceedings of the meeting of the 24th of June. I just need to seek committee agreement that the minutes are a true and accurate reflection, and if so, I will sign them. Are committee agreed? Okay. Item 5 is matters arising. And just to inform members that the PAC retains primacy on the Northern Ireland Audit Office report on the Planning Appeals Commission, but has released the report on flood risk management from primacy. So, in terms of that, are there any matters arising from either of those?
If I could declare an interest as a PAC member, just it was discussed at our last meeting last week, and
sure,
I think people were content to release it to Infrastructure Committee.
Okay.
Generally.
So that's fine. Thank you for that, Stephen. So essentially, that means that if this committee were minded to take on and have a look at the flood risk management, then we could do that. Do any members have anything they want to say on that?
No, just I think that would be a good idea given the report and the gravity of what's included in it and the risk that it faces. Just what form or how would we do we need to agree a form of how that takes, or what are the options open to the committee to sort of look at that, Chair?
Michael, what do you think?
Well, members could just look at the report and decide if there's anything that they want to write to the department about.
Okay.
Just to remind members that there will be 3 bills potentially between now and the end of the mandate. It's just in terms of timetabling for anything more than that, but it's a committee decision if they wish to take it any further than that.
So essentially, Andrew, we could ask for the report for scrutiny. We could write to the department, and then we maybe could have departmental officials in to answer some questions around it. If you thought that would be useful in terms of the committee?
I think that would be, Chair.
Okay, I'd be certainly content with that as well.
Chair, there's also the option of inviting the audit office to oral evidence as well.
Yeah, well, that would be our session for that day. So then I'll just make a proposal that we take on the flood risk management report from the NIAO, and then we will commission some. We'll maybe see if we can get the department official to have a look at it, right to the department, and we'll do that when we're back from the summer. Our committee agreed to that. Okay.
I'm not fully content with that. I think given the workload that we already have with this committee, I don't think that's something we should be electing to take on. But I defer.
Right,
I think if we put that to a vote, I wouldn't win that vote with the committee. I think there's consensus to take it on, but can I just urge some caution that we don't delve too deep into it. By all means, have a look at it. As Michael said, see, is there anything we can pick out of it if we want to write to the department? But in terms of scrutinising this in any great detail on top of the bills that we already have left to look at in this short time frame left in this mandate, I don't think that's a good idea.
Okay, no, Sinead, look, there may be a range of views then on the committee in terms of that, and I want to make sure that they're all heard. Are you content, Sinead, that we take on the report along the lines, we're not talking about obviously an inquiry necessarily here, but take on the report with, in the first instance, probably something to the department with a view to having maybe the department in on a session at the same time as the audit office, just to assess what the department's response to that is in terms of scrutiny, or is that a bridge too far? Even what I've suggested, is that a bridge too far for you?
Yeah, no, I have no issue with that. It's the terminology of we take this on. I don't think we should take this on top of the workload that we already have, but I'm happy for us to have a look at it, see is there anything that is pertinent to this committee, and by all means talk to the department officials or the audit office. But I'm only erring my own caution here in terms of taking it on as such and being distracted from the legislation that we actually have to deal with. That's all, Chair. But I'm happy with your proposal as you've set out there.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you, Sinead. Just if anyone else has any views on this, I don't want to limit this, but well, okay. In that case, given the fact that the PAC have released it to us, that we ask for the report. We probably all know what's in it because there has been a little bit of discussion around this already in the chamber. We'll have a range of views on it, and I'm conscious also it impacts on some of our constituencies more than others. You know, Stephen and I suffer a little bit from it in terms of Donaghadee with sort of rising tides and the impact there. But I'm conscious that some constituencies this impacts in a fairly sizable way. So I propose then that we ask for the release report to be sent to this committee with a view to at least, in the first instance, writing to the department regarding its response to that, with a view then, and it'll be up to the committee to decide at that point, to ask for departmental officials and the audit office to come in and talk to it. So, do we have committee agreement on that?
Yep.
Okay.
Just to share the logistics of that. So the report was in the pack when it was published, and the committee was awaiting a decision from the PAC on that. So I can redistribute that to members for their consideration. And was the proposal to write to the department to ask for a response on it?
Yep, we can do that now.
Usually be a memorandum
and they can.
I think. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'll then take members to page 22, which is the core memo, and from the correspondence that we've got in. I'll take members through, and then with the actions that I have, and then at the end of that process, I will open it up to all members. If any members have anything they want to raise that I have not, you're more than welcome to do that. At page 26, we have a response from the Minister to the committee's correspondence regarding regionally significant planning applications issued following a briefing from officials during planning review. I just need to seek committee agreement to note this and consider this in the context of any committee motion that we might bring forward in terms of our planning inquiry after we get back. Our committee agreed to that. Page 43, we have correspondence from the Committee for the Executive Office, enclosing briefing papers on HMO provision received from Housing Rights NI, just to seek committee agreement to write to the Department requesting any available data on the impact of HMOs on parking provision. The committee agreed to that. Page 53, we have correspondence from the Committee for the Economy, enclosing briefing papers following its evidence session with Tourism NI in respect of tourism inspections and categorisation. I need to seek committee agreement to write to the Department to ask what engagement there has been with the Department for the Economy regarding planning guidance and tourist accommodation in the context of the consultation. Our committee agreed.
Great.
Page 148, we have correspondence from the Committee for the Economy for views on the Regional Balance Bill, which is yet to reach second stage. I'm always a little bit wary of stuff that we're being asked to comment on that actually hasn't passed through the Assembly yet. Do we have any views we want to raise on that one? Okay. Our committee agreed to write back to the Department of the Economy, just saying we have no views at this point in time. Can we say agree?
Agree.
Okay. At page 449, we have a response from the Member of the Public to committee correspondence advising the correspondent that it does not have a role in relation to the Planning Appeals Commission inquiries, and I need to seek committee agreement in that case to write to the Department to request a criteria for referral of a planning application to the Planning Appeals Commission. Our committee agreed. Good. And I'll open it up to anyone else of the core memo. If anyone has anything that they wish to raise, you can now. Amazing. Okay, that's core disposed of.
To note the rest.
Oh, yes, and are we happy to note the rest? Okay, yeah, fine. Okay, so item 7 is the Tree Protection Bill, brought by none other than Peter McReynolds, member of this committee. So page 563 is the Tree Protection Bill, the consultation document. At table papers at page 3 is the bill as introduced at first stage. At page 19 is the AFM. At page 35 is the call for evidence draft. At page 37 is the citizen space draft. At page 42 is the press release draft, and at page 44 is the stakeholder list. Okay, so today we obviously have one of our own committee members giving their thoughts really on the consultation primarily. Just to remind members that this bill has not yet passed the Assembly. It is just being introduced, I think yesterday perhaps. So it actually hasn't passed the Assembly at second stage yet, but I would like to invite Peter to make a presentation on the bill, and then Peter, it will hardly be surprising that you might even get some questions from committee members on your evidence, but the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Just let me get set up.
Do you want me to keep talking and
Yeah, of course.
stalling?
I love your dulcet tones.
The stuff all connected up there.
Yes.
I just need to seek committee agreement that this evidence session is recorded by Hansard. Our committee agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. And that's probably as much stalling as I can really do, Peter, for you. So all the details for this really run from page 563, which is Peter's consultation, and then the table papers have all the rest of the information.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. It's quite unusual being on this side with everyone looking at me this way, but thank you for the opportunity to present my tree protection bill. This is a presentation that I've given. There's only about 9 slides, but I've given it about 20 times in the last 4 years or so now, but it kind of gives you a flavour in terms of what we're trying to achieve with the bill. So this just lays out the context of why we're looking to propose a tree protection bill. Northern Ireland currently has the lowest woodland cover in the UK and Ireland. We currently have the lowest urban cover in the UK. and I think we rank 12th for biodiversity loss throughout Europe as well. So we're starting from a pretty low ebb, but I think with this bill, a quote that was said to me from someone very in the early days was, the most important tree to plant is the tree that you planted yesterday. And what we commonly see from local councils is a scrabble to plant as many as possible, but how many of those actually manage to make it to 10 years old, 15 years old, 20 years old? So this bill seeks to protect the trees that are already there, rather than simply planting lots of saplings. The context as well is that Northern Ireland really likes trees. Polling has been done extensively in terms of what the public's views are of trees. Famous examples that come to my mind in terms of when trees have been felled against the wishes of... What's wrong? Technical issues not of my making. But in terms of the context of trees, the public really like them. So in South Belfast, for example, at Lag and Towbridge, DFI went out, cut down lots of trees, public anger. Orangefield Park in East Belfast, I think about 400 trees were cut down against the wishes of the public, and quite suddenly by a contractor of Belfast City Council. They weren't TPO'd, but they were still cut down. Sycamore Gap as well, it was in the media this morning even just. Lots of public anger and outrage, and that's why more protections are needed, because once it's gone, it's gone. Is this appearing, Johnny? No? Okay. I'll crack on as if it is. There's a public consultation from 27th of November 24 until the 9th of March, 15 weeks, gave it a bit of an extra period given Christmas. We've got about 716 responses and really strong support for the bill, with about 90% in favour of many of the proposals that were contained within that. So the purpose of the bill covers three broad strands, I think, as we approach being able to see them. Firstly, strengthening protection provided through tree preservation orders, which all of our local councils will be carrying out in various different ways, and really strengthening enforcement as well of what happens whenever a tree is felled. For example, including replacements of the trees, monitoring of the trees to make sure that they reach 5 years old and a good heavy-duty standard. Secondly, supporting our oldest and most significant trees, our ancient trees, which are very much so irreplaceable. And thirdly, safeguarding ancient and long-established woodland from development. So yeah, now we just go through just a bit more information in terms of what the TPOs will achieve in terms of lifting from the English legislation causing or permitting the felling of a tree. What we see through the local councils is that many are trying to implement this, but when it comes to the legislation, when it gets in front of a judge, the judge will go by the primary legislation, which currently says in Northern Ireland causing the felling, but in England, Scotland and Wales, it's causing and permitting the felling of a tree. So we're looking to incorporate that. The introduction of ecosystem services as an additional attribute for making a TPO. Currently it's just the amenity of the tree. There's a number of other reasons as to why you would apply a TPO contained within the schedule of the bill. Speeding up the application of a TPO. Currently you get a provisional TPO whenever you apply for one. After 6 months, if there's no objections or concerns raised about it, it'll automatically become a TPO treat, rather than a council official having to go back every 6 months to carry out an observation of the tree. So that'll speed things up for the local council officials, and that was done in conjunction with local council officials as well. As I've mentioned, the replacement of trees as well, and ensuring the establishment of trees, and the introduction of an online tree protection map, which was contained within the Strengthening Our Roots report from 2023. Ancient trees will have increased protection as well, contained within ecosystem services. And then thirdly and lastly, development safeguards, which may be of interest to you, Chair, as a North Down member of the Assembly, and Stephen as well from North Down, with Tully Wood. Famously, with this bill in operation, we wouldn't have seen what happened at Tully Wood. So yeah,
I thought for a minute there, Peter, you were gonna reference the tree in Castle Park, which the Duke of Schomberg tied his horse to, and is still protected with a fence there.
Wow. Okay.
There's a new one for you. That is
I-
protected. That's got a big barrier around it.
I've learned a lot about trees over the course of the last 4
There-
years, so I've learned something even today.
Is that a new one today, Peter?
Exactly,
Oh,
it
there
is.
you go.
But yes,
Sorry, just that's Strangford as well, the Tulnagardy area.
it is, yeah.
North Down
Oh yes,
as
of
well,
course,
so-
ours in North Down, ours in North Down. But yes, so with this bill in place, that would never have been an issue. I think it was one of the few members watching that planning meeting that night when I saw what unfolded there. But with this bill in place, we wouldn't see that take place. So I'm not sure if everyone actually saw the presentation, but that's it from me. So happy to take any questions. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. No, thank you for that, Peter, and thank you for bringing forward a really interesting bill as well. I think the first question for me is a quiz question, nearly. The tree in England that was in the gap that was cut down and it made the national news. It was a tree that was hundreds and hundreds of years old. It was already, I suppose it was already covered through a TPO, but somebody went ahead and did it. I suppose just to reflect, how do you feel about that? Is this bill sort of trying to reinforce the fact that these trees will be subject to better protection? We won't see things like that, or?
Yeah, initially, whenever we were having conversations about what you would seek to achieve through having something like this, I encountered there's a fountain in city centre. Is it the Jefferson Fountain or the Thomas Fountain? I can't remember what it is, but it's down what it's named. It's down at just across from the BBC studios, and it's a listed fountain which has all these various protections. I think it was 1885 it was constructed, but just across the road from it at Wetherspoons there's a tree that was planted at the exact same time, and it has 0 protections. So what we're seeking to achieve is to try to give to more trees protections that already exist for listed buildings, because we protect listed buildings, some of our oldest buildings, with so much history behind them as well. But when it comes to trees, there's a major gap there. So what happens with the sycamore gap? What happens? Regardless of whatever policies or rules you have in place, if someone wants to go out there to destroy a tree, they can go out there to destroy a tree. So this fits into a wider piece about increasing knowledge, awareness, protections for trees, because once they're gone, they're gone.
You mentioned in terms of the replacement trees, there's the bill will seek to place a duty on councils to inspect these replacement trees for a period of 5 years. Have you any assessment yet as to the number of trees that might require that level of assessment, or is that something you've considered yet?
We don't have precise figures in terms of the TPOs because there's 11 different councils. I think we want to have, as a part of this, a map which will show where the TPO trees are. Now, 6 of the councils are already doing that. 5 of them aren't doing that. So it's to try to bring a bit of uniformity to how we actually measure some of our oldest, most significant trees. We've engaged with the Tree Forum Council at Belfast City Council. We'll do so again over the summer as well to go back with the finalised proposals that we have contained within the bill. But broadly, there was support for that because it increases their knowledge, their awareness and their ability overall to monitor trees that are presently there. But whenever we have these replacement trees included as well, I think there was an initial concern that could be a bit of an onerous burden on those local councils. But a quick photograph sent in, it doesn't require someone constantly going out to check. Photographs provided will be completely sufficient to do that. And I think
that's useful to know. Yeah, it was the replacement trees, I suppose, rather than the TPOs I was talking about there. So I'm just obviously these numbers, and if this progresses past second stage, this detail will become more important. But it was just that your initial assessment of the number of trees, the replacement trees that might require assessment, and obviously that assessment process to ensure that wasn't particularly onerous. But
I think it's fair to say there may be a modest uptake in terms of increased applications for TPO trees. Obviously the request for TPO trees, but I don't think it's going to be wholesale in terms of thousands suddenly. I mean, we see there's plenty, for example, of urban trees in Belfast, less so as we move outside that urban area. So I don't think it'll be hugely significant. And I should say at this point as well, I think Belfast is doing really well in terms of the map that they have already in place and the work that they're carrying out.
Okay, no, it's fine. The only other thing I had was just in terms of the planning applications and permitted development, the amending of the Planning Act. There's an aspect of that on point C, the deterioration of an ancient tree that is subject to a TPO. The planning permission would be refused where the granting of planning permission would result in the deterioration of an ancient tree that's subject to a TPO unless the applicant demonstrates that there are wholly exceptional circumstances justifying the grant of planning permission. In terms of that phrase, wholly exceptional circumstances, what can you give the committee some idea what those look like? Because that might be quite important in terms of, you know, someone trying to build houses or whatever, which are within this these criteria.
And yes, conversations on this kind of get a little bit philosophical as well, and I know you appreciate a conversation like that, Chair. But whenever we were kicking this around, I mean, I think it's the phrase that's used within legislation in other areas in GB. Okay. Wholly exceptional is usually defined by the judge. The judge will determine what is wholly exceptional, because you've reached the court. Wholly exceptional is so exceptional, it's hard to put that into legislation that changes over time. You know, what does wholly exceptional look like in 50 years? Are we going on 2026 for wholly exceptional, or for the circumstances that exist, whatever they may be in 50, 100 years time? So really that's just helpful for a judge to be able to lean upon that for the judiciary. Okay,
it's fine. So there'd be essentially, I mean, there could be case law that will sit behind previous judgments, maybe in England and Wales, that will give some illustration to what wholly exceptional circumstances would be. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's fine. Thank you very much, Peter. John.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and apologies I can't be there in person. I've got an event this morning. Peter, thanks so much for this. I know that you and I both met. I think you probably met with most of the committee one-to-one, and we've already discussed aspects of this, but just following on from a couple of points, if you don't mind, you mentioned about I think it's 6, you said, councils that are currently tracking and mapping TPOs versus 5 that aren't. Can you just talk me through the engagement you maybe had with those 5 councils that aren't, and what it would take for them to get to that? And is that the direction of travel they're currently on, or do you sense that there'll need to be a push to get them onto that wavelength first and foremost?
I think it's fair to say that there's a desire amongst local council officials to have increased support. One thing that came up, so in terms of the consultation process, we met with the Tree Forum, which is the main directors of all the various different councils in Northern Ireland. We did further online engagement once the proposals in the bill had been tightened somewhat post-consultation. There was 2 further engagement sessions, and I think what became clear for me was that there's a frustration that the council officials can't do more. A lot of the council officials are trained planners who are having to operate as tree officers at the same time. So there is a gap, I think, that exists across the various local councils to better support the tree officers that we have in place, because they want to do more but feel constrained and maybe under-resourced as well. I think what will flow from this bill is clarity, the closure of loopholes in terms of what eventually gets to a court and what guidance can be provided to local council officials and arboriculturalists having an increased role within being a council officer. So there's definitely appetite for them. In terms of the 5 other councils, I couldn't name them off the top of my head because I'm digging back pretty far in my memory, but very much so supportive if there is a resource provided by the department to ensure that they're all fully able to have a map in some sort of uniformity across the 11 councils. As I said earlier, Belfast is doing a really good job, so they have the technology and the ability just to lift from them and apply that across the various areas. Also, I mentioned the urban area within Belfast is doing really well, but as you move outside of Belfast, less so, because there are less trees. So there won't actually be that much work to actually carry out to apply this.
Okay, thanks, Peter. That's useful to know. You may have covered this. I got kicked off briefly during the start of your presentation, so we may have covered this, but I'm just interested, outside of the councils, have you had feedback, or do you anticipate a role or an impact on the likes of the Forestry Service, Woodland Trust, Northern Ireland Water, all of whom have obviously vast amount of trees within their estates? Some have different reasons for having them. for example, the Forestry Service versus the Woodland Trust? I'm just interested to know the feedback you've got from them in regards to this and how they see it working.
Yeah, so I suppose in terms of forestry, because it's a point that's come up quite a lot online, forestry is obviously managed by DERA. This is strictly the Planning Act and the Department for Infrastructure, urban trees and ERMs that are accessible to and visible to the public. DERA, for example, will have a lot of commercial trees through their forestry service and actually makes money from growing trees and cutting them down. That's a really important part of ensuring good biodiversity, but also working with trees rather than just having them sitting there as something pretty to look at. So TPOs wouldn't be applicable to those trees in DERA because they're commercial. These are for trees that are, as I say, usually found on public land and places like that. So it wouldn't be fully relevant. In terms of the Woodland Trust, constant engagement. They're the experts on this. They're really supportive. They came out yesterday to welcome it. And certainly they will have a role to ensure that local councils are really well supported in terms of training and guidance, even maybe the design of the map that I just mentioned. So Woodland Trust have been engaged throughout for the last 4 years.
Okay. And just a final one then, I suppose. So obviously you set out with the greatest of intent and I think to make things perfect, but I'm just wondering on the back of just since it's been published and others have engaged, do you see anything that you'd want to add into this to potentially strengthen it or to amend it at this stage, or do you think it's pretty much where it needs to be?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I was having this conversation with Kelly Armstrong yesterday. Kelly likes to talk about her private members bill. Really keen to work with the committee and to work with other members. For the last 4 years, the bill has gone through peaks and troughs and it's changed quite significantly. Part of the proposal has actually included a conversation with the department where they got an early look at the first draft and actually raised some really interesting points, and the bill was refined a little bit from that because we're keen to work with everyone to make sure that we have, I think it already is, a really practical focused bill that'll improve tree protections, but I'm always willing to listen to experts. That's why the Woodland Trust have been engaged throughout, why we've shared the first draft with the department. So I'm not sure what amendments will need to happen, but certainly really happy to work with the committee and to make sure that we get to a really good place and hopefully get it through before the end of the mandate as well.
No problem, Peter. Thanks so much. And apologies, Chair, if you could hear my rooster who's at the window here crowing away. So
I thought you were making those sounds, John. No, it's
me.
right. Okay, it's
It's either a cat or a rooster. You never know in this place. But yeah, thanks very much.
just make sure those two don't meet. Okay. Thank you, John. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Peter, for coming in today. It's good to see you at the other side of the table, and commend you, I suppose, for your work that you have done. I know you've done a lot of considerable work to get to this stage. Just a couple of points, sort of outline points around what level of how you've quantified any sort of financial, implications of your proposals. Obviously, the department, I think, had given some feedback along those lines, maybe at an early stage, and it links in as well with councils even facing pressures, to do what they're doing currently. And I know from experience, even within a number of councils where resources is a huge issue, and even right down to where the TPO officers, I think there is challenges around maybe it's only one or two individuals in those roles. So how do you, has there been any work done to assess sort of financial implications at this stage?
Yeah, there was a raised paper done as part of the process about what that could look like. It's difficult to quantify externally, but I would expect there to be a modest uplift. I mean, for example, this is going to include the increased training, increased roles being created as well, so that councils are able to do their roles more effectively. Having met, as I said earlier, with the tree forum at director level of Belfast City Council, one of the directors pointed out, this can be seen as increased resource constraints, but this can also be seen as opportunities for good green jobs, which is a really important part of what we're all, I think, trying to achieve within the Assembly. Good jobs that work with our environment. These things don't just happen. It requires people who are skilled and trained to a high enough level to carry out jobs and to carry them out quickly. One positive that I have mentioned within the proposals is the automatic application of a TPO after 6 months, rather than officials constantly having to go back out again. So there's compromise there in terms of that will actually reduce the burdens on local councils. In terms of those replacement trees that are planted, it's not just going to require it won't just have to require someone constantly going out to check the trees. It'll require even just a photograph, and then someone sends that in, so it's electronically looked at. So I actually think within the bill there's compromise and flexibilities built in to reduce any pressure that could have on local councils, rather than making their lives more difficult.
Okay, and have you noticed any much variation between 11 councils? I know you've talked about the 5 and 6 that do or don't have the mapping system, but in terms of resources and how they administer, prioritise TPOs currently?
I think it's fair to say that across 11 different councils, they're doing their best to adapt to the legislation. Amenity presently isn't defined very well within the legislation, so amenity is taken in 11 different variations. I am going by Belfast as an East Belfast MLA, but I know all of them apply that in their own unique circumstances, maybe based on resources within that council. So at that meeting that I mentioned with the Tree Forum, which we'll go back to over the summer, Belfast, I think, is applying it in a really good way. Others, I think, saw the bill as something that could frustrate them and put more work upon them. But I think that there's enough reassurance contained within the bill and the explanatory and financial memorandum that explains that it shouldn't have too much of an impact on them, and actually it will clarify and make their jobs easier than what they presently are.
Mm-hmm. There was some feedback through the consultation, and I suppose that exists out there around, I suppose, unintended consequences where it could maybe further frustrate and delay, building or much needed lack of housing, tackling that issue, housing shortages and so on. So I suppose I'm keen to hear your thoughts on that, just around, do you feel it could add another layer of red tape effectively to tackle the housing supply issue, for example?
Ancient and long established woodland is 0.04% of land in Northern Ireland, so we're starting on a minuscule percentage of land in Northern Ireland. We already have areas of townscape character that are well established in Northern Ireland. We've got conservation areas, so there's rules that are already in place for planning and development. I think that this is something that's done in England, Scotland and Wales in terms of protections for ancient woodland, protections for trees. So I think in Northern Ireland, absolutely, it's something that we should do here. I don't think it'll frustrate developers. I don't think it'll frustrate them at all, to be honest. But it's just about building houses in the right areas rather than focusing in on a minuscule patches of land to build houses, for example. But I think with this bill, there'll be increased knowledge and awareness of where those areas are to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Okay, final point, just I presume there's provision within the bill around where trees are damaged, with disease and so on, and also maybe carry safety risks. Is there any sort of provision around those issues?
Not within the bill, because I clarified this recently, but in the original Planning Act 2011, I think it's clause 122.5. If a tree is diseased, dying, posing risks to human life or property, it's totally reasonable to remove that tree. It actually came up in the meeting with the tree officers.
Do you accept that would overrule?
Absolutely.
Any?
Absolutely. I would never say that a tree should take priority over human life or property.
Mm-hmm.
So that exists already within the 2011 Act. And that's something that the bill doesn't seek to remove.
Okay, I think that's important, yeah. Okay, thanks, Peter. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Militia.
Well, thanks for over, Peter. To T Vela on board. You're very welcome, and you're on the other side of the table today. So, Peter, you engaged with different councils and so on. Did you engage with the Australian Demand Council?
I think they were along at one of the online meetings. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe has the name Prehen Woods come up in your discussions and that with them?
I definitely recognise that name, but I don't know why. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I know why, because it was alluded to earlier on there just about planners finding themselves in the position that they have to make a judgment in relation to particular wooded areas, and there was always a dispute in there in relation to Prehen Woods, whether it was ancient woodland or not. Okay. That's a difficult question possibly in itself to answer, but it just shows you the complexity of the issue. That when we are actually dealing with it, and then in its impact on planning itself. Now, in the meetings that you would have had with the department and so on, was the planning issue raised there?
Prehen Woods?
Well, of its impact on planning throughout?
We had 2 meetings with the department, one here and one in my office. I think ancient, long-established woodland did come up as a point of discussion. we had initially been kicking around the idea much I think it's in England, the desire is for ancient long established woodland to have that buffer zone of 50 metres, and we had initially proposed 50 metres, but from the conversation with the department we felt that it was maybe a slightly less reasonable, so we scaled that back to 15.
Well, I know that, and again, to come back to the Prehan Woods one, and you know if you were approaching Derry from the Strabane side.
I do it regularly.
Yeah, it's on the right hand side of the road, and it's very, very obvious, the actual area itself. But as I say, a long running dispute in that whole area, and in exactly the context that you talk about within this bill itself. So, would you view then too, we'll say, an introducing the bill that would have any long-term impact in relation to planning and so on?
I don't think it'll have a long-term impact in relation to planning. I think it'll give clarity. It'll protect the trees that we already have and protect the ancient woodland that's already there. As I say, it's 0.04%. I know you've given a precise example here, but it's 0.4% of land, and it's biodiversity that can't be replaced. So I'd be keen that, I remember having a moment where I was wondering to myself, with my previous researcher, where is this going with the ancient woodland? And she said to me, but in 100 years' time, you'll see the benefits of this bill, because we're looking to protect what's already there, hopefully expand that, because it's irreplaceable by biodiversity. But I don't think it'll have a long-term impact at all. I think it's the good thing to do from an environmental perspective.
And that it will not limit, we'll say, critical infrastructure development.
No, there's built-in mechanisms there in terms of so for example, we're talking about Tully Nagarty, ancient woodland. I think was it 5 luxury homes to be built. Does that need to be built on ancient long-established woodland luxury homes? I don't think so. If it's critical, and those are the things that can be worked out further down the line. But in terms of critical infrastructure, if it's going to upend society, absolutely that should not get in the way. There's mechanisms built in within the bill in terms of wholly exceptional and everything else. So I don't think that should be a barrier for the bill moving forward.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Militia. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Peter. We've had 1689 Schomburg's tree, we've got 1798 Trees of Liberty, but we'll not dwell on those ones there, so on that, Peter, you'll be glad to know.
Did you bring balance to this committee though?
Be nothing that didn't bring balance now, we've nothing that didn't bring balance. Peter, you touched on it there just in your last point actually, regarding development and the ancient woodland. Have you engaged with the construction sector, and what have they had any assessment of the bill?
During the consultation process, we reached out to as many people as possible. I would never want it to be seen as subjective and only operating within a vacuum, and I think that's why it's shifted as much as it has, and up until very recently has continued to do so. We had reached out to a number of bodies. Construction Employers Federation I've got a good relationship with, given I'm on this committee with all of you. It took a while to get a response from them. I chased a response on 2 or 3 occasions to make sure that I was able to reflect their views. They had said that there was no concerns about the bill. In writing, I think that's included within one of the consultation documents, because having the construction sector aware of the bill, but also mindful of the bill as well, is a really important part of this. So I think that was quite reassuring. The Construction Employers Federation came back with that in writing, and it's included within one of the documents as well.
Thank you. You mentioned the low tree cover that we had. You've mentioned sort of the biodiversity benefits and the general annoyance of what people feel whenever trees are cut down, and I've experienced that in my own constituency. But what are the additional benefits of trees, and is there any expanding on what the benefits actually are, sort of societally, for trees?
In terms of the legislation as it presently stands for the application of TPOs, it's the only criteria applied is via immunity and the expediency of applying a TPO. Ecosystem services being included within that now, or via this bill, broadens that out to reflect the variety of different ways that trees bring benefits to all of our lives. It's well known in terms of bringing in carbon, emitting oxygen, impact on lowering temperatures, which is really important, physical and mental health. At the moment, Eastside Partnership in East Belfast in my constituency are carrying out a cross-community project whereby they're working with Ballymacarrat, but also Short Strand, to plant more urban trees, because whenever you go to areas that haven't historically had trees, and straight away you think of Shandon Park, Malone Road, but Ballymacarrat and Short Strand have missed out of the benefits of trees. So there's a desire to plant more urban trees to acknowledge those positive impacts that they have on all our lives in terms of added recreation, even impact on road safety. There's studies that show that tree-lined streets reduce the speed of vehicles as well. So those are just a flavour of some of the benefits, but as I say, reflected within ecosystem services by which someone could apply for a TPO.
Thank you, Chair. Castlewellan has 50 Irish and British champion trees, so if you ever want to come and see champion trees, you're very welcome. Sure, Chair.
What's a champion tree?
Oh, there's all sorts of different classifications, like anything, you know what I mean? But Castlewellan Arboretum has 50 British and Irish champion trees, height, girth, everything, yeah.
Okay. We always seek to educate, and you know, Andrew, at this committee. Justin, you're very welcome, brother. It's just over to you.
Thank you. Perfect timing, Chair.
Perfect timing as ever, Justin.
Thank you. And listen, believe it or believe it not, Peter, I'm a bit of a tree lover and tree hugger, and a lot of time for trees. You mentioned the 0.04% of coverage of ancient woodland. It's not going to cut in terms of forestation. We've got lowest rates of forestation on this continent, and this is not really going to do much for it. In that regard, have you had many discussions with the Department for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs in terms of their ambitions in planting as opposed to just preserving what's there?
As I mentioned earlier, you maybe didn't hear it because you were on the Zoom, you were dialing in. This is primarily focused on the Planning Act, which is the responsibility of DFI. I think DERA were consulted. That's probably in the consultation document in your packs. I can't bring to mind what their response was. I think just that they have no concerns with the bill moving forward, but this is expressly in terms of planning and to address some of the issues that we see in terms of breaches of TPOs, which again are for the Department of Infrastructure, but will sort of run in parallel with the recommendations that came out of the 2023 Strengthening Our Roots report, which found, I think, 369 breaches of TPOs, which led to only one going to court and 0 enforcement. So there's a major gap within the legislation from a DFI perspective, rather than gaps that you're mentioning there in terms of DERA.
And obviously the department are one of the culprits themselves. I can think of many cases where ancient Irish oaks were felled for department medical purposes. Is there any hierarchy of trees?
I suppose there is a hierarchy of trees. Not all trees are created equally. I'm thinking. This is true. The experts will say this. Will and trust. I'm thinking of.
Is it Orwell? I think. He used to talk about pigs.
So I'm thinking now of. I mean, there was that famous LBC interview. I don't know if you've seen this. I didn't think to mention this today in committee, whereby I think a carpenter was brought on to talk to one of the broadcasters, and he was criticised for being a carpenter by virtue of cutting down trees, and that must be a bad thing. And I said, well, trees are restorative. We can grow trees. They grow back. Christmas trees, famously, are grown to be cut down. Are they as good? So I suppose if you're talking about a hierarchy of trees, the Irish oaks that you just mentioned there, in terms of tree, in terms of this, a Christmas tree that's grown to be cut down once a year, absolutely that's not as important as maybe a tree that could be 100 could grow to 150 years old. So I don't know what that hierarchy would look like. I'm not an expert in trees, but I suppose there definitely would be.
Well, the hierarchy I would speak of is the native Irish trees, Irish oaks, Irish pines, ash, hazel. And there was mention of Castlewellan trees, or the Castlewellan gold, which I describe as a weed tree, which was it's been genetically modified tree. So is the Irish woodland, is there any more credence given to ancient Irish oak, to the actual native Irish trees that have been on here for centuries, even before the planters?
There's no mention of that within the bill as it is. I think that could be an interesting amendment, Justin. But there's no mention of that within the bill as it presently stands. Certainly in terms of the proposals, that was never something that was discussed. It's not something the Woodland Trust has raised with me in terms of the various conversations I've had with them. But more than happy to look into that, maybe over the summer.
A nice amendment to protect Irish trees first.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, no, happy to look into it over the summer.
Listen, I know we've been trying to meet over a series of occasions, Peter, but listen, good luck. I'm a big supporter of the idea behind the bill, and well done, and best of luck for going forward.
Well, that's all. I didn't think we were going to get into such contentious areas as hierarchy of trees and Irish. English oaks also are available. Trying to get some balance in this committee here, Justin. And let's not forget chestnuts, which are incredibly important because it gives a facility for our children to throw sticks at them and get chestnuts down at a certain time of year. Certainly, that's what I'm not sure I should declare an interest at this point. But that's certainly what I did as a child, and what I've brought my kids up to do as well, so we could still play conkers. Peter, that was really interesting. And thank you so much for coming to the committee.
Can I just have a wee quick one?
Yes, Harry. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
No,
of course you
you're fine,
can.
you're quite fine. So I probably didn't raise my hand in the proper order, but no problem.
That's okay. You're always welcome.
Peter, I just wonder, what about the impact to our farmers? What impact will the bill have on our farmers as it is? Please. Thank you.
I don't think it'll have any impact on farmers, Harry. The Ulster Farmers Union responded to the consultation as well, and I can't remember precisely what they said, but it was a positive response from the farmers. And actually, I mean, any farmer that isn't unaware that there's a 200-year-old tree on their land, I'd be surprised. There was a point during the various conversations that we were having on this where we had actually, and this is why it was actually really helpful to meet with the department to have a conversation. We were looking at an early stage, looking to have a scheme in place for ancient trees, whereby if you had an ancient tree on your land, because we were thinking of farmers, that could be have a financial impact on a farmer. So we thought we will maybe create a scheme whereby you can apply for money or assistance to actually help you with this. Having met with the department, they had said you're kind of trying to solve a problem that isn't really there. We know where those trees that are 50 years plus, I think there's only about 50, ancient trees, there's about 50 in Northern Ireland. Everyone's going to be aware of where they are. Some of them are actually on National Trust land. Some of them are maybe publicly owned in other areas. They're not just randomly located somewhere. So you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't seem to actually exist. So that's why we amended and refined the bill again. So no, Harry, to answer your question, I don't think it'll have an impact on farmers, and certainly the response we've had from farmers already is that they don't have any concerns that it will either.
That's great. Thank you very much, and thank you for all your work on. And just to finish, maybe, Peter, are there any exemptions? Will there be anyone exempt from the bill? Thank you.
Exempt from applying a TPO, or?
Yeah, like small holding farms, small landowners. Would there be any cases where there could be an exemption in place for special cases? Thank you.
I don't think that there's an exemption per se. I mean, every tree that someone wants to have a TPO applied to it, and a boroculturalist will have to go out and inspect it. If they deem that it's not appropriate to apply that TPO for whatever reason, that'll be for them as an expert to carry out. But there wouldn't be an exemption built in per se into the bill presently.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Harry. Okay, so thank you very much for your evidence, Peter. Obviously, the bill as it stands was introduced by Peter on Monday, I think, at first season, or Monday, yeah, okay. So we were obviously just hearing about the consultation and so forth, so committee members would be aware that the bill hasn't yet passed second stage and hasn't yet passed through the Assembly, so it has not yet been referred to this committee, and we're hearing obviously Peter's reflections and some questions in terms of his consultation. We have two of these today. We have obviously just had Peter. We will be having the display of flags and emblems oral evidence shortly. committee has to make a decision about how it then proceeds with this. So there are essentially two options. Option one is that we proceed to a call for evidence more or less now over the summer. I suppose in reflecting on that, we are on recess, but that's okay, and you'll be probably talking about a 9-week consultation from probably the 6th of July. I'm also conscious that if we do that, I suppose we're taking a call for evidence on a bill. As Peter, to be honest, your bill is not quite as contentious as perhaps the next one we're going to be facing into, but I'm trying to be fair both to you and to perhaps your colleague. We're taking a call for evidence on a bill that hasn't passed second stage. And whilst we all, perhaps based on chatting today so far, I think it'd be fair to say that there's good policy intent behind this, Peter, notwithstanding it hasn't yet got to committee stage and it hasn't passed the Assembly. So if we decide to issue call for evidence now, I think it's about £1,000 to do that, and perhaps committee may be minded to do that on either this bill or both bills or neither bill. It's up to the committee to decide what it wants to do at this point. But it's just to remind members that what we're doing today is reflecting on a bill that hasn't yet passed second stage and hasn't yet been referred to this committee. So I'm open to views on this one as to what we do either on this one. I'm trying to be consistent because the next one, as we know, will be more contentious. So whether or not we decide to make a decision just on this, or make a decision on both, or make a decision on neither, that's ultimately up to the committee. And I'd certainly welcome views from the committee in terms of that. Just my job to point this out, Andrew.
I'd be content to call for evidence now, Chair, and get the process rolling as best we can. So, I mean, that's where I'm at.
That's fine. Okay. I want to take views from anyone else on this, if anyone has any views. Sinead?
I don't have an issue with either per se. It just seems a bit procedurally, maybe Michael and others can keep us right. I mean, would it be the done thing to issue a call for evidence before a bill is passed second stage?
And Michael, I'll let Michael answer to that one.
It's the usual practice to issue a call for evidence after second stage, but in view of the impending end of the mandate and the time that a bill would take to in its passage through the Assembly, I know a number of committees are considering calls for evidence prior to second stage. It's not procedurally the norm, but under the circumstances, it's an option the committee may wish to take to hit the ground running basically in September. It's just so enough bills get their full consideration and scrutiny during the passage of the Assembly is the plus. The downside clearly is cost, and if it doesn't pass second stage, then that cost is for nothing.
We may be like a wee bit silly having issued no
or prudent
depending, but yeah, okay. Well, Michael's given some balance there to that. Sinead, I'll take views from anyone else who wants to come in. Andrew,
just to follow up on really, we've had a condensed mandate in the 3 years. We all know that. We've already the policy intent behind this is good. It's a non-controversial. I think to give it the best fair wind or a bit of organic fertilizer growing, it would be good to get the call for evidence. Happy to propose.
Yeah. Okay. Any other views?
Chair, I personally think I think we do have to be prudent with our time and so on. And I do have concerns about the protocol, I suppose, as Michael has outlined, where it would be more the standard to come after second stage. I think that is more in order. Personally, I'd be more comfortable with that approach.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just my opinion at this stage.
Okay. Justin?
Fire on.
Fire on. Okay. Look, I don't want to get into sort of, voting territory. We haven't had a vote yet, but I'm conscious, I suppose in balance, I'm a little bit, there's strong cases on both sides. I am a wee bit wary of straying outside of what we would normally do in terms of taking a call for evidence before this is actually past second stage. I'm also conscious that perhaps this bill in itself isn't overly controversial in terms of the policy intent behind it, and mindful also of the fact that we do have a compressed mandate and we have a limited amount of time. Okay, so I think in terms of what we've heard so far, I think Sinead is probably referring a sort of neutral standpoint. Peter, to be fair, hasn't given any view on it, but I suspect I would know what his was if he,
Not sure if it's appropriate as I sit here.
Sponsor. I understand that, Peter. I suppose I would be probably a little bit closer to Stephen on it. I think Justin is obviously crack on, I think was the phrase perhaps that he used, or proceed. So look,
sorry,
go ahead, Sinead.
I'm only just thinking in an issue of fairness. I mean, if we're being honest, Paul is coming in to speak to us about her bill.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be honest about the fact that it is potentially controversial.
Yeah.
And may not pass second stage. I mean, I have no issue with what Peter's bill and his presentation this morning. I think it's, I'd be happy for that to go, but it's in interest of fairness to both bill sponsors.
Yeah, and to be fair, Sinead, I think I've tried to softly reflect that, and you probably picked that up, that actually we're looking at two bills, one of which is fairly uncontroversial. I think the devil probably in the detail, Peter, as you know, when it gets to the second stage, gets back to committee, and we start looking at some of these things, but certainly the policy intent, as being reflected by the committee today, is positive. And I suppose I'm also wary of then, a situation arising, and I'm quite content with it, I have to say, where we say, okay, we will issue a call for evidence in this case because this is not controversial, and we would expect it, given the discussion on the committee, to pass second stage. So it will come back, and we will have all this evidence then, essentially to look at. But then shortly we will be having exactly the same with another PMB, that there is significantly more question marks as to whether it will pass second stage, and I am then wary of, slightly wary but willing to say, okay, this is your party colleague, to say actually in this case it's okay. But shortly we might take committee might take a different view, because we do not, we wouldn't have the same level of confidence that the next PMB will pass second stage. In which case we're left with having spent £1,000, issued a call for evidence that we're never going to use, and in my view, Michael has intimated this, we're also stepping outside what the norm would be in terms of how committees proceed with PMBs that haven't yet passed
Am I able to offer a view from here? Do I need to?
Yeah, of course you can.
Should I do?
Yeah, come on back to the.
Come on, join the Kirk.
The cheap seats down here, Peter.
Get off that horse and get on.
No, I suppose it's, I think the call for evidence is I appreciate that my bill isn't, many would think that it is controversial in terms of its ambition, but I mean I appreciate in terms of Paula's bill there could be more political sensitivities or whatever, but I think regardless of the consultation, the call for evidence, that takes place, we'll still have a really informed debate at that second stage. We're in sort of unique circumstances, and I know the other committees are taking this approach, but I think it's going to deliver better debate, a higher standard of debate at that second stage. And I think that whilst I appreciate this isn't the done thing, I think that both, whilst one is deemed more controversial than the other, I think both will lead to an outcome whereby the debate that takes place at second stage is very much so more informed. I mean, I've taken part, for example, we're talking about flags and emblems. I've taken part in a debate on that, I think it's a year or two ago now, I can't remember. But I think if a call for evidence takes place, whether or not that second stage is passed by whichever bill, I think that it's still a worthwhile thing to have done. Given it's, I mean, I think it's £1,000, £3,000, not breaking the bank in the grand scheme of things. Whilst I appreciate, Michael, you said prudent, but I think that second stage, there's still two issues which are really important to the public, and I think regardless of what we all may think in terms of our views politically on both, I think that second stage will be better informed with that call for evidence having taken place regardless. That's my view.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Militia.
Sure.
Sorry, Sinead, give me 1 second. We'll take Militia and then back to you, Sinead.
Just at the same point too, I'd have thought too, just in the interest of fairness and openness and the likes of it, that we should wait until the second stage before we have that call for evidence. Never been consistent in every respect.
Okay. That's fine, Militia. Thank you for that. Sinead?
Yeah, no, sure. I don't disagree essentially with what Peter has said. I'm just conscious too of the fact that the bills were only introduced yesterday. We've had very little time ourselves to read them. So I mean, we're having this conversation today with Peter and Paula, but once we actually get a chance to dissect the bills ourselves in more detail, we may have a different view. Yeah. So I think it's better to just follow the norms in terms of the processes around wait until the bill's past second stage.
Okay, fine. Harry, you're the only one who hasn't spoken, who's still in here. I know John's had to dip out. Harry, do you have, I'm going to ask you if you have any views, just the only person who hasn't spoken who's still actually in committee. Probably note those then. So okay, well look, I don't want to necessarily. I don't think it's helpful to push this to a vote. Although people are minded to, we can. I think probably in terms of reflecting on where we are at the committee, I think Andrew and Peter and Justin, certainly on this bill, I don't know Justin's thoughts on the next one, would be minded to let this go forward. I think probably Militia, Sinead, Stephen, probably in balance me as well. I think on this one perhaps I'd probably be a little bit more minded perhaps to let it go forward. I'm more conscious of the next one, but I also then there's an issue for me in terms of trying to be fair and equal to both.
Sure.
Peter?
Just for the clock, Michael. You mentioned other committees are proposing this approach. Do you know what other bills are having their call for evidence during the summer?
I'm not aware of that. I just know it is a conversation that's been had, and it's up to individual committees to decide.
Have any taken that approach?
Not to my knowledge so far, but I couldn't tell you. I haven't done a study of it, just a survey just yet. And I know other committees will be considering this same question. It's whether they've considered it yet.
Yeah. Okay, so look, I think the norm for this is probably not issuing the call for evidence before second stage and a bill passes. I am minded of the fact that we have a compressed mandate and there perhaps are some reasons to consider it. In terms of this committee, I think probably the balance is not to issue call for evidence prior to second stage. I'm just trying to reflect who has shared views on this so far. Unless we want to push this to a vote, which
I think, Chair, it might be just fair to have a vote on it. And I see no problem with that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think the consistency issue with the two, I think that is a central issue.
Yeah, well, maybe. I was going to propose that initially that we seek committee agreement to wait for the second stage before seeking call for evidence. But I suppose we could have a vote on it if members are minded to. But I think in balance of the views so far, I think that's probably where we're going to end up. As I noted, I suppose there's the procedural aspect of it, but I think in particular there is the sensitivities more so in the bill that we're about, or the PMB that we're about to consider, rather than Peter's. So, Chair's role. So I would need to seek committee agreement that we wait for this bill to pass second stage at the Assembly before issuing its call for evidence. Our committee agreed.
Agreed.
Okay.
I voice disagreed.
You can certainly. I think it's fair to absolutely,
yeah,
Peter.
I think it's a lost opportunity. I think political sensitivities aside that we all have, I think the public care about both these issues, and I think that we're not serving the public well enough if both bills, Paul hasn't even spoken yet, aren't able to proceed to second stage, whether or not that's September, October, November, whatever it may be. And I think the ROI is small in terms of prudence, but I think that I think we're just doing a disservice to the public, and I think it's a real shame if both bills, which I think the public will care about for two very different reasons, aren't able to proceed.
And look, I mean, well, those are noted, Peter. I mean, I certainly hope that it gets to it'll get second stage. I'm sure we'll come to this committee and we will do our best. So it's not, I don't want this to be seen as hampering progress. We're in unusual territory here. But yeah, okay. And I think Justin, yep.
Can I just be clear? If we do proceed with the call for evidence now, will that speed up the process?
Yes.
That will allow the more efficiency around the delivery of this bill.
It will allow us to gather evidence prior to the bill getting to second stage and being referred to the committee. Normally, what we would do, Justin, would be, as you know, once it's referred to this committee and a bill is passed second stage, we would issue a call for evidence. That's normally what we do. But we have, I think, to be fair, we have talked about the circumstances that this committee finds itself in terms of timescale and so forth. But yes.
Well, given the shortened mandate, I think that's reasonable for us to do as a committee.
I think it's fair to say we'll still have a committee stage. I will be coming back to present and field questions at a later stage as well.
Yeah. Andrew?
Chair, I actually want to pick up on Mr. Dunn's point about, for the interest of clarity and transparency and all the rest of it, about a vote. I think that I am in total agreement with what my colleague Peter's just said. I think that if we're going to be fair about this, then I think it possibly should, just for, rather than, and I think you've known the cut of my jib by now. I wouldn't be inclined to do such a thing, but just I know the difficulty that you're in trying to deal with the non-verbals, but I think just for, I do just think the vote would be actually tidy this up.
Absolutely. No, I'm more than happy to do that, and there are often votes on committees. I mean, I try to be consent. My job is to try and, where I can, bring the committee together to a consensus around these things. Sometimes you just can't do that. So, just to be clear, then, I think initially, and I'll go back to Michael on this. I mean, initially, Michael, we sort of had committee agreement to do one thing. I mean, Andrew, I suppose, is proposing a vote now. Is there a mechanism to do that, or has committee already agreed?
I think when agreement was sought, there was some dissent, and then so it's your call, Chair. But
it's okay. I am more than happy to have a vote. That's absolutely fine. So we'll do that. Mike, Sinead, thank you.
Yeah, can I just check? So obviously, I'm mindful of the presentation we're going to get after this. and you had made the suggestion, do we make a decision on both bills, or are we going to take both these bills individually in terms of whether we think?
I think it's a really good point, Sinead, and a very good one in terms of clarity. Look, I think what we will do is we're going to vote on both bills. So it's an issue of procedure for the committee as to whether the committee will take these PMBs and issue call for evidence now, or whether we will follow more established procedures and wait until they pass second stage. So that would be my understanding, and it's important that the committee have clarity around what we are voting on. So it's the committee procedure regarding these two PMBs, which we're taking some consultation evidence on today, but have not yet passed second stage at the Assembly and have not yet been referred to this committee. Michael.
Yep. So we're proceeding to a vote.
We are.
Chair. So what happens now is that the question is clarified as to what we're voting on. There'll be a proposer for the question, and then votes will be recorded as to who votes aye, who no, and who abstains.
Is this for, sorry, Chair, is this for mine, or is this for mine and Paula's?
This is both now, Peter.
When Paula hasn't presented, what?
We're establishing, I think, well, we could do it either way, but I think it's cleaner to establish what the committee's procedure is at this point in time, given the two bills we're having today, as to what our procedure is for issuing a call for evidence prior to the bill being referred to the committee at third stage. So I think it's just because, and Sinead made this point, I think it gets a little messy when we're taking them individually. I think we should be as clear as we can and as fair and equitable as we can in that treatment is given the same to both bills.
Sure.
Justin.
In that regard, we should be voting individually on both.
Okay.
Because they're not, one's controversial, one's not.
So again, I am minded that we probably as a committee should try and be consistent in how we approach this, and I would be very, slightly more wary of having, at this point in time, given the fact we're now voting on these things, having one vote for one and one vote for the other. Militia.
Yeah, and I just expressed to you too, Chair, that I think that we're establishing a precedent here. Really, that's what we're voting on, and that we're departing from what, in fact, has been procedure.
Yeah.
So, as sort of more or less saying to us, we would establish a precedent that whereby we can do that prior to any presentation that we actually will get on any particular bill.
Yeah, so I think you're right, Militia. I think what we're probably doing here, and I'll bring you in a second, Andrew, is establishing what this committee, at least for this mandate, there'll be a different committee next time, but what this how this committee is going to treat the PMBs that we have that have not yet been officially referred to this committee in terms of call for evidence. And I think it's only fair that there's a level of consistency, despite the fact that one bill the committee might view as more controversial than the other. Andrew.
I'm not terribly happy with that, because I think if that was the case, then we should have had a discussion at the start of everything saying what is the committee's mind to do with second calls before. Okay. Now, if that had been the case, I would have quite happily, we could have had the discussion around the houses first. But the fact of the matter is, we've taken evidence from one PMB.
Yeah.
We have now. We have strayed into a vote, which is fair enough. I think, given that the divergence of views was expressed. But I would have reservations. It wouldn't sit well with me to then not have a vote, or we're presupposing as well that there's a lot of prepositions going on here now, Chair. You know what I mean? And I appreciate that, given the situation. Anyway, I think I've garbled the end of it, but I think I made the point made.
You well garbled through that. Look, I mean, my job is only to sort of manage the process. It's up to the committee as to what it wants to do, but we have to find a way through it. Certainly, we will be voting, I suppose, and then in terms of trying to bring a little bit of clarity to this, it's now the question is, are we voting separately on both bills so that we would establish one procedure for one bill and another procedure for another bill? And I am concerned about the fact that that sends out a fairly inconsistent, throughout the process of voting, an inconsistent message. I think what the committee should be doing in terms of consistency and equity is that we probably have to have a vote now on how we proceed with these two PMBs in terms of what procedure we apply to them and whether or not we issue call for evidence before they reach second stage or not. I can't see any other way through it. Sinead.
Yeah, I mean, Chair, we're not voting on the merits of these bills.
No.
We're not voting on whether we support them or not. We're voting on whether we set aside the already established procedure and mechanisms for bills moving forward through committee stage. We're voting on whether we set that aside.
Yes.
So I think we need to park our support or otherwise for the bills and decide whether we're going to depart from the normally established processes. That's my understanding of what we're voting on.
Yep. Okay.
I'd indicated previously.
Peter, go ahead.
It's just to touch on something that Andy had said that triggered a thought in my head. Like I've come along to committee today. Paula's going to be coming along shortly as well. Is that the norm previously, that bill sponsors propose or come to committee on 2 occasions to present in terms of call for evidence? Or, to quote my bill, is this wholly exceptional in that we have until effectively mid-March next year to get this through? And to touch on what Justin said in terms of, to quote my bill, expediency, having an informed second stage it's not ideal, but it's the reality that we now face because this place was down for 2 years, that we can take a wholly exceptional approach, because unless we pass both to have call for evidence in a constrained mandate, both could fall basically because of whatever decision we make today. And I think that's why all of the committees are looking at this, hopefully with a view of permitting them to go ahead, because regardless of what we all think as MLAs about what's politically contentious or not, I should say at this point, I learned during the 4-year period that trees are highly contentious, but regardless of what we all think, the public really care about this stuff. And if it lapses and it goes into the next mandate or whatever, I think that's a real shame, not to quote myself again. Michael, in terms of previous mandates, obviously political instability, and I don't want the Infrastructure Committee to become talking about that. In terms of political instability, has the call for evidence taken place before the second stage to permit a bill to get a fair crack in terms of the next number of months? Has that happened before, or are we making something completely unique here?
It has happened before.
It has.
Is the short answer to that. As to when bill sponsors present to committees, it can really happen at any time. There's been precedent where it's been before introduction. The practice in this committee has been when there is an actual published bill. It can really take place any time that a committee decides to do so, depending on the legislation being proposed. But it has been in the past. There have been calls for evidence before second stage.
It's not that we're going.
It wouldn't be departing from. It's not unprecedented. Let's put it that way.
It's not that we're going against the norms. It's that if we were to pass mine and to pass Paula's
procedure, procedure that the norm would be after second stage to call for evidence.
The norm would be a consistent 5-year period to do this, but ours is constrained, and that's why you get a wholly exceptional circumstance taking place.
And as to the votes, it would be procedurally cleaner to have 2 votes. Just to put that in.
Okay.
Unless you want to.
That's useful. No, that's useful to know, Michael. And you're keep me right. Okay. Justin.
Sure, I will just say finally, we can get tied up with establishment, procedure and process to slow everything down if that's the way we choose to go. We're not setting new precedent, we're not breaking new ground here, we just want to see a swift passage of a very, very positive bill moving through this House. And we can have a vote in one or vote in the other, but let's not get tied up in process and procedure and establishment stoppage talk.
And I understand that, Justin. I suppose in bringing a level of balance, there are there are things that we do need to do and procedures that we do need to follow at committee. I'm not necessarily saying that as we've had a debate around this, that there are peculiarities to this. However, some things are there for very good reason, so that there's consistency and equity across government. Not necessarily in this case. Right, okay. So I think we're going to have a vote on this.
On this one bill.
On this one bill, having taken advice from the clerk, cleaner that we do one at a time. Okay, so the question is that right? That we wait until the bill, in this case, the tree protection bill, gets referred to this committee before issuing a call for evidence.
Wait until the tree protection bill proceeds from this. Sorry, just repeat that there, sure.
Michael will do.
That the committee will wait until the tree protection bill is referred to committee following second stage before issuing a call for evidence. And is that being proposed by the chair?
Yeah.
Just received some information, Chair, from a highly passionate individual who loves trees, that the Regional Balance Bill has undergone, it's been debated, as they're having their call for evidence over the summer, and that's in advance of second stage. So that's an example from this mandate.
Michael?
So,
yeah.
a show of hands, ayes for the proposal that to wait until the tree protection bill is referred to the committee following second stage before issuing a call for evidence. Show of hands, ayes. Mr. Martin, Mr. Dunn, Mr. McHugh, and Ms. Ennis. Noes. Mr. Murray, Mr. McNulty, and Mr.
Justin, Peter, and
Reynolds.
Andrew.
Yes. Great. So there are 4 ayes and 3 noes. The question put stands.
Okay. Wow. That's a conclusion of item 7. We will now go to item 8, which is the display of flags and emblems bill. Do you want, in fact, are we still
current at the moment? Yeah.
Do you want to take a break for 5 minutes, or?
It's your call, Chair.
Yeah, let's take a break for 5 minutes. Jonathan, we're suspend for 5.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound. Committee.
Everyone, welcome back to the Infrastructure Committee. We are just starting item 8, which is the display of flags and emblems bill and oral evidence from Paula Bradshaw, MLA. I'll take committee members to the relevant pages. At page 583, we have the display of flags and emblems bill consultation document. Table papers at page 48, we have the bill as introduced. At page 60, we have the EFM as introduced. At page 72, we have the RAISE potential public purse implications. At page 91, we have the RAISE stakeholder list. At page 101, we have the citizens space draft. At page 104, we have the call for evidence draft. And at page 106, we have the press released draft. I would like to welcome Paula to this committee. I need in the first instance just to seek committee agreement that this evidence session is recorded by Hansard. Our committee agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, brilliant. And in that case, I'm going to hand over to Paula, who will present some of her consultation findings. And then, Paula, as you would imagine, there may be some questions after that. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members, and thank you for giving me some time at your committee meeting this morning to present my bill, which is entitled Display of Flags and Emblems. I have been working on this bill for 9 years now, and during this time we have had 2 prolonged periods of suspension of this assembly, a global pandemic, and the publication of the report of the Commission of Flags, Identity, Culture and Tradition. And while the legal space around flags has not changed during this period, I would say that the public space has. We are seeing more and larger flags erected in our increasingly integrated society. Our neighbourhoods are becoming more mixed, to use a local colloquialism, and more diverse than when the Flags Commission began its important work in June 2016. This is why I am proposing a bill to provide a clear, consistent and fair legal framework to govern the erection of flags and emblems on street furniture. And when I refer to street furniture, I'm not just talking about lighting columns, I'm talking about railings and billboards on public land, something that I know that this committee has spent time discussing. At present, there is no clear legal basis for regulating the flags and emblems, nor is there a consistent enforcement mechanism for public authorities to act. The current legislation does provide for a variety of offences around public order and prohibits certain displays on street furniture. However, I believe we need clarity in law around statutory duties and responsibilities, and as such, a standalone piece of legislation solely on this issue is needed. And so its purpose is to allow for respect of cultural celebration and commemoration, while preventing intimidation, territorial marking and the coercive use of symbols. And individuals and organisations will be able to display flags and emblems on street furniture, and I will come to this when I go into the specifics of the bill. But there will also be the ability of those who do not want to see the flags and emblems in their neighbourhood to give their views, and for those to be recorded and considered by the Department in any potential enforcement action. Mr Chairman, I understand how important it is that this bill of mine strikes a balance between Article 10 of the European Convention of Human Rights and the right to freedom of expression, and Article 8, the right to privacy and family life. And I would highlight that Article 10 does state that everyone has the right to freedom of expression, but it does go on to state that the exercise of these freedoms, since it carries with it duties and responsibilities, may be subject to such formalities, conditions, restrictions and penalties. And I appreciate that there are many who do not want to see a change in the current arrangements. However, many of the people who contact me do. I have received 5 emails in the past week alone from my constituents expressing their dismay that huge and multiple flags have been erected in their area without consultation, without any consideration for the local demography, nor their opinions. And they are asking, why do their views not matter? And Mr Chairman, I do want to give you a real life scenario. And I have all the emails to back this up. I'm prepared to provide them to committee, but I just want to give you an understanding of the type of issue I've been dealing with. So a couple of years ago, I was contacted by the parents of a pupil who attended Fleming Filton School. And you will all be aware that this is a special educational needs school, and the girl also had major health complications. The family would describe themselves as being from a Catholic background and were dismayed when 2 Union flags were erected either side of the gates to the school. And they felt that since these were the only flags on the Upper Malone Road, that they were being erected to intimidate people from their background from attending the school. So I contacted the Department for Infrastructure and asked that they work with the PSNI to have these removed. I was told that they would have to consult with local community representatives, and after a few days the response was that they weren't to come down, and that if they were, 15 more would go up. Does anyone in this room feel that that approach that is currently undertaken is acceptable? Who are these community representatives that the PSNI are consulting with, and why is their right to freedom of cultural expression trump the rights of a child to privacy, family life and, most importantly, to their education? I have 9 years of this type of example, Mr Chairman, but for the basis of time, I will hopefully just go and speak to the piece of legislation and how it would operate in practice. So the starting...
Well, I was a wee bit worried you were going to take us through those 9 years,
no.
because
Let me tell
you may know your colleague will want this room at 2 o'clock.
I keep receipts. I have folders and folders of these, and
okay.
I can go through them.
No, that's okay.
I'll go on.
No,
Mr.
you're
Chairman.
okay. Please.
Okay, so the starting point is that the Department for Infrastructure would apply the public interest test when it becomes aware or is notified about through a submission on its online portal as per clause 3 of my bill. This would mean that in circumstances where a flag or emblem is erected on street furniture, it must be removed where they deem it to be intimidatory, threatening, stir up hatred, arise fear and or of a prescribed organisation. So that would be an absolute duty in clauses 1 section 1 and 1 section 2 of the bill. In clause 1 section 3, it sets out where there is a presumption that the department will remove the flags and emblems where they have deemed them to be offensive, abusive, insulting, in the vicinity of a sensitive place, antagonistic, not conducive to good community relations, demarcates that place as belonging exclusively to persons with a particular national or cultural identity, or it is a public hazard. And in clause 1 section 4, it provides that the department must take account of views and information provided on the online portal, as outlined in clause 3, including the views of those living in the vicinity of the flag or emblem, the importance of being able to live free from harassment and intimidation, whether the flag has been displayed for an excessive period of time, whether the flag or emblem is being displayed for the purposes of celebration or commemoration, and again this information can be relayed through the online portal, and whether the flag complies with the code of practice, and again we get onto that in clause 4. So in clause 5, it provides the department with the ability to assess whether its actions or inaction would pass the reasonable persons test. Clause 1.6 places a duty on the department to remove a flag or emblem as soon as possible. I chose not to provide a specific time frame for this, as I am conscious that the department will have limited resources and will have to prioritise intervention and removal based on the views expressed in the online portal and all the other factors that I have already listed. Clause 2, section 1, it sets out definitions and examples of what are sensitive places, for example, a place of worship or an interfaith area. Clause 1.2 provides examples of where public services are provided, for example, a school, and Clause 2.3 provides examples of shared communal places, for example, public parks. Mr. Chairman, I've got a few more pages, so just raise your hand when you want me to stop talking.
You're okay. No, you're okay.
Thank you. So moving on then, Mr. Chairman. Clause 3 provides for the provision or adaptation of an existing online portal by the department, as I mentioned earlier, to notify voluntarily. Nobody would be mandated to do so, but if they wish to have or have displayed a flag or emblem, the reasons for doing so, for example, a certain cultural celebration, but I would imagine also this would relate to sporting events or community festivals, while also providing on this online portal the ability for residents and other stakeholders to give their views on the flags in a particular location at a particular time. Importantly, underpinning all these considerations, I have included Clause 4, which places a duty on the department to consult on and then produce a code of practice on the display of flags and emblems within 12 months of the Act coming into operation, and this must be reviewed every 5 years. And this clause lists the bodies and main bodies and government departments that it must consult, including the Human Rights Commission and the PSNI, for example. So this code of practice draws on the work of the Flags Commission, which produced its own possible code relating to the respectful display of flags. And the word respect is used throughout this code, their code. Respect for the flag, respect for the community, and respect for the event. The next two clauses of the bill, Clause 5, stipulates that anyone obstructing the removal of a flag or emblem is guilty of an offence, which would be a summary conviction to a fine not exceeding level 3 on the standard scale, which currently would be a maximum of £1,000. And Clause 5 provides that the department may request assistance from the PSNI where there is a concern that the removal of a flag or emblem may result in a breach of the peace or an obstruction, as per Clause 5. So just on these last two clauses, Mr. Chairman, I have not tried to turn up the temperature on the issue of the removal of flags in my bill. But there is an issue that you may, as a committee, wish to consider, and that would be the introduction or looking at what would happen in the scenario where DFI have gone through their own due process and have removed some flags, and then they go up in the exact same place. What would happen in that place within a certain period, for example? In closing, Mr. Chairman, the issue of flags has been a contentious one for decades now, and we have seen multiple attempts to grapple with it, and I'm not just referring to the Flags Commission, but also, for example, the Flags Protocol of 2005. Nothing has worked, and 20 years on from the Good Friday Agreement, where citizens of this country signed up to the principles of partnership and equality in terms of mutual respect and reconciliation in terms of respect for all traditions, the agreement explicitly demands full respect for all identity, ethos and aspirations for both communities, meaning that neither culture, history nor political identity is superior to the other. What I believe my bill provides is a robust legal framework where we can take the contention out of the issue by taking account of the many competing views on the display of flags and emblems in our shared public space. And thank you. I am happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula, for giving us that summary. I'll start off with a few questions, and they'll mainly be focused on the consultation rather than the bill itself. When I read through it, it was very, very interesting. And thank you for bringing this to this committee. On your consultation summary, which was attached in, at 1.5 you said it was clear there was some orchestration of responses to the public consultation as two specific templates were used.
Yes.
Can you tell us a wee bit more about that?
Well, so some of the orange orders, those type of institutions and political parties, including, for example, the TUV, then they use their social media to encourage people to respond to it. And the reason why I believe that there was a degree of that, so if you look at question 2 in terms of the responses, the highest percentage of responses was in relation to people strongly disagreeing around the removal of flags that related to prescribed organisations. And I don't think that there's anybody in this room as a cross-section of society would agree that that should be the most prevalent response to it. So there was a degree, but look, I said whenever I went out to consultation that I wanted to hear all views. The FICT Commission had recommended that we have a mandatory system of notification. I have stopped short of that. I think that a voluntary system is a better balance of human rights. So I have taken on board the consultation responses, but I do, when I looked through all the comments, it was clear that there was a large section of society did take the opportunity to respond, and I appreciate everybody's efforts.
That's fine. And would you further accept then, I understand how you've explained that. I mean, look, you've been an MLA for a lot longer than I have. We often would get email campaigns, and regardless of what that issue would be, we get emails all the time that are exactly the same, sometimes from constituents and sometimes not. Would you accept that, because I did feel that maybe the way you phrased that, okay, was, that it skewed the consultation in some way, regardless of what it is. Would you accept, however, the validity that, some people will reply, especially to consultations, and may, to give an example, there may be something on sport, and a football club, for example, would send out, like, if you agree with our position on this, they'll send out to all their members and say, you can send this in. Would you accept the validity of each of those individual responses, even though they are very similar in nature?
There's no question that I really appreciate with over 8,000 responses. There is no question about the validity of those responses. All I'm saying is that I wanted to reflect and I wanted to continue to pursue my bill. And if I had have stopped at question 2 there and said, okay, well, the number of responses have said, actually, let's allow these flags to prescribe terrorist organisations to continue to fly. So I personally, and given my own inbox and the contact, as you say, I'm in my constituency 10 years, and I would be very much described as a community-based legal legislator. So I know what the feeling is on the ground. I'm out tonight, I'm out tomorrow night, I'm out on Saturday, out knocking doors in my constituency. I know in the areas that I represent that there is a strong sense that people feel frustrated. They don't want to see these flags up, and so what I'm proposing today is not necessarily a reflection of the feedback that I've received, because a lot of people who support me and engage with me don't want to see any flags at all. But what I feel that I have done here is struck a balance to allow flags to fly, to allow people to celebrate their cultural heritage, sporting background, etc., but also then put it in a framework that would mean that the flags would not be flying in perpetuity, turn into rags, and then almost disrespect the cause that they were erected to commemorate.
I'll stick on just that 1.5. Just the next sentence there says, although this skewed the responses somewhat quantitatively towards a unionist perspective, the overall range of public viewpoints remain clear. I mean, I did have a look at the consultation. I'll ask the question, how did you know that this was skewing it towards a unionist perspective?
Okay, well, page 1 of the 1.63, for example, our of responses were from an organisation. So we have Money Slain Flute Band, we have got the Chosen Few, Royal Black Preceptory, we've got the Upper Cross Scar, Loyal Orange Order, we've got the Ballylisk. So I have a full list, and then in terms of all the commentary under each question, when you've been given an option for comments, then it's on that basis. Okay.
That's fine.
So it's there. I feel that it's robust enough, and I stand over my commentary.
Okay. I can go on. Just 1.7 in terms of costings. Again, just from your consultation, you said there was never envisaged that the proposed legislation would come at a significant cost, and then further on at 8.1. You said during the consultation it was clear that the bill should not proceed at substantial cost to the taxpayer. I mean, have you considered, because you sort of touched on it in your evidence, Paul, but you didn't really go into it, so that issue that, for example, a union flag is flying somewhere or an Irish tricolour for that matter is flying somewhere. People want it down, so they sort of, this bill passes and they report it, and someone's sent to take that flag down, maybe from someone from DFI and someone from the police. Have you considered how much it will cost, or do you have any sort of quantifiables as to how much it would cost to take a flag down, for example?
Well, yes, so there was a paper that was supplied to you, which was produced by Raise, and so they said that it would be in the region of £143 per removal.
Yeah.
And then the overall cost would be just shy of £29,000. Now, I do know that and it's there, it's independently worked out. I do appreciate that if there's a set aside or a specific portal just for this issue, that more people will report. So I'm not saying that is exactly what it will be, but it's in that ballpark. Like, it's not millions, it's tens of thousands of pounds. And I would contest that there are businesses in my constituency, for example, who feel that it would be money well spent because there are so many flags around where they are trying to attract customers from all sides of the community, and they feel that they are unable to do that, and they have staff members who are of different religious and cultural backgrounds, and that they just want to operate and do business in an area that is free from sort of demarcation of one side of the community over the other.
Mm-hmm. Would you accept that, given that figure, and say the flags that we're talking about, obviously these aren't prescribed flags, these might be national flags that have gone up, and there may be a couple of flags in an area, and this all happens, and the DFI go along with the police and get taken down, and it costs whatever it was, £300 maybe for a couple of flags, but an additional 10 might go up. People might be really frustrated because they might feel, actually, this is our flag and we want it flying here. And then DFI and the police have to go back and take those flags down. Yeah. Would you accept that actually this could get incredibly expensive in terms of back and forward and the cost of all this?
Well, I did, in my opening remarks, Mr. Chairman, I did say that this might be something that you consider in terms of an additional offence included in the bill as an amendment to actually where there's transparency around why the departmental officials have actually done a determination that we will go in and remove flags from a certain area, and that will be publicly available, and that if people decided to put it up, well, then there would be the potential for another fine or something like that. But look, at the end of the day, we as a society should not be dictated to by mob rule. If this becomes a law, for example, we have to provide the resources to the department to go and create our shared spaces where flags can be respected, they can be flown, but in a way that is not excessive and that does not offend or intimidate some people from using that shared space.
Okay. Sort of last question then from me, and then we'll pass on if some other colleagues are going to ask you a few questions. Andrew's up next. You said there in developing the bill, and I'm talking about sort of consultation here. Well, to recognise that the bill permits the department to consult other appropriate persons as appropriate. There's no specific requirement for it to consult or seek views of local community groups. And in developing the bill, what was the rationale for not making it an explicit requirement for DFI to consult with local community groups?
Well, the consultation that I've referred to was around the code of practice, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
But I've said there that in the section there, in exercising its functions under the circumstances, in clause 1.4 it says that they must consider the views of those living in the vicinity of the flags and emblems. So there is a consultative role there. It's explicit there in 1.4b.
So that would be people. Just read out that clause again there, sorry, Paula.
1.4, in determining if this presumption is rebutted, the department must consider, and I go to B here, the views of those living in the vicinity of the flag or emblem, and whether it's, and also then they would have to refer to any views expressed on the portal. So there is a clause there around consulting with local people for their views.
Okay, so that's based on vicinity of where the flag is, but not the wider community, for example. They're not a community group that was in the vicinity, is that correct?
Well, I suppose I haven't gone so far as to put a definition around that. There will obviously be secondary legislation around this and a code of practice. So those finer details, all I put on the face of the bill are the principles and the how it would operate. But the vicinity there, I'm sure there's a definition somewhere within the Department for Infrastructure. But yeah, there's a clause there specifically around consulting.
No, thank you, Paula. I might come back just at the end, okay. But Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Bradshaw. I think you make the point 9 years, 2 suspensions in the pandemic. Decades, and puts the context on it, but it probably isn't a story as old as time in this corner of the country. In terms, you talk about the evidence for the bill. Would you agree that the evidence is all around us when we see paramilitary flags marking out territory, flags causing intimidation, just across the board? Yeah.
Well, I suppose in the last few days we have seen a number of press articles. We've seen the banner go up on public land. So whilst we maybe in this room we view a lot of this in the realms of flags of a particular nationality, we're also seeing a lot of billboards going up. We're seeing a lot of posters going up that are quite racist in nature. And so I think that we should be allowing our public space to be free for everybody to go to. But look, it's more about, it's really about that public space. I was up the coast on Sunday for a drive, and I went through Glenarm, lovely village, and there's flags, Union flags and Ulster banner everywhere. You go up the next town of Carnlough, and then there's flags, tricklers and other flags up there. And these places are for tourists, they're for the local residents, they should be for everyone, and I don't think that we should allow little communities, some very small minority in those communities to almost say there's a domination of national identity in this community over this. And I think that, as you say, 28 years on from the Good Friday Agreement, I think that we should be long past those sorts of demarcation examples.
Thank you, Paula. You mentioned the Fleming Fulton example. There's a similar example as I drive to work. There's a new housing development, and as soon as the lights went up, there were 2 flags either side of it. Yeah. But ultimately, how, much of this about making our streets and public spaces as welcome to everybody as possible, and how do you think that this bill advances that?
Well, I have actually specifically included the issue of new housing developments, for example, in terms of the sensitive places, because we've all seen that, and again I have got a pile of press statements from political parties, representatives from right across the chamber and beyond, of people expressing deep concern that flags are put up just outside new housing developments, again to try and show a dominance that only people from a certain background should buy a house here. I have a constituent in my area I spoke to within the last couple of weeks, and she had persuaded her husband, cross-community couple, persuaded her husband to buy a house in South Belfast. He's from West Belfast, and she said as soon as they put the deposit down on the house, then the flags went up. And she said, and I know that area, and I'm sure that people who put those flags up will have travelled at least half a mile to that location. So it is very frustrating for people who work hard, pay their rates, pay their taxes, want to live in a shared neighbourhood, and then they find that there's somebody takes it upon themselves to try and demark territory, mark a community for one over the other. And society has moved way past that now, in my opinion.
Just one more. and you referenced your drive up the country. I'm going to reference my cycle of the border, and again on that cycle I can tell you I kept a rough tally. I found 2 examples of overt political expression from one side, and I lost count of the other. And I suppose the question from that is, again, as you also said as well, every party across the board has at various times challenged the presence of flags, challenged the presence of billboards, challenged the presence of political sloganeering or whatever. Again, how do you think that, and do you agree that your bill will help with all such instances of flags or such like being put up for the guards' intimidation and exclusion?
Well, I'll start a wee bit back from that, and just to reiterate that I want to see the use of flags for celebration and commemoration, and there are parts of my constituency like the Lisbon Road where it's a traditional marching route, and local people are said, look, as long as they come down at the end of the summer. So there are people who say we fully respect unionist tradition where they want to put flags up in that area, for example. But we do know then that there are other flags, and we've seen there very, very recently the article there where families flee their homes after 20 masked men descend on mixed Craigavon estate to erect flags. So, that is purely for intimidation purposes. And so what I've tried to do is strike a balance where people have genuine the Orange Orders, they want to put the flags around their lodge, and they want to, have a bit of a celebration around the 12th, etc. That is totally different in my opinion, totally different. And I worked in the Loyalist community of the village for a long time, 13 years, and we would have had celebrations around coronations, around royal weddings and stuff with the bunting up, and there was a wonderful community atmosphere and stuff. So I absolutely stand over what I did at that time in terms of supporting the community to celebrate these wonderful events. But I think this is where we need the framework to strike the balance, where in those instances where those flags go up, the police have to go straight in, the DFI have to go in, possibly with the support of the police, to get them down, because it is not right that where people are trying to move on and live in mixed communities like the one in Craigavon, that we have to allow people to just live and raise their children without what we all had to grow up in the sort of green and orange, or that area is for them and that area is for us. No, I think that society's moved on, and that's why we have to put a regulatory framework around this.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Militia.
Well, thank you, Paula. You're very welcome here today, Paula. 9 years, you said. Well, I've been dealing with this issue for a lifetime, much longer than the 9 years. A perennial issue in the community that I live in, which is about almost 70% nationalist. And yet and all, every year in the beginning of the month of June, it's decorated from top to bottom with union flags and the likes of it. And that when it comes to those special occasions that you alluded to there, we totally respect that as well too. So if the Orange Order comes along and actually would decorate the area, we'll say for the 12th of July, they usually put up on a specific date and they take them down just after it as well too. So that's grand. But yet and all, this other group who are very small in terms of being in any way representative of anything, we'll say, in the Castlereagh community, they still seem to have the ability to go along and to do that, because no one's going to interfere with it one way or the other, that they put up all of these flags all over the place. And at the end of the day, I have to say, and this applies to everyone, no one wants politics in their face 365 days of the year. No one. And it doesn't make any difference what flag it is that we're talking about. No one needs that. No one needs that whatsoever. But in dealing with the problem, it is very, very difficult, especially when the people who actually are involved in creating that type of angst within a community, they also then too are quite prepared to put their heads in the sand and pretend that there's nothing to do with them or take no responsibility for it and don't engage. And I only had an engagement only last week again too with the likes of the PSNI, and that in relation to the issue in my own town. And the PSNI do attempt to communicate with some of these groups and so on. So really the question that I'm actually getting to here is that how do we get to that stage of whereby we do have political buy-in, because that is what is actually needed. So that in having political buy-in, and I mean from all parties, that you end up then isolating maybe those very, very small unrepresentative groups who are only but creating angst within communities?
Yeah, no, thank you for your question. So I suppose we had the 2005 flags protocol, and that was almost like a voluntary arrangement, and again I have a copy of it here, and I think it didn't work. I think that they got to the point of the consultation and then they didn't then act in terms of going in and actually removing them. So then we've had the years, I'm not going to rehearse all what happened, but we obviously ended up with the Flags Commission. £800,000 of money was spent. A lot of people spent their time, energy, responding, attending consultation events, etc. And whilst there wasn't a recommendation, a firm recommendation around it, there was a consensus that there needed to be some code of practice. But there also was there was agreement that the status quo doesn't work. And so what I have tried to do is take the principles of that work and bring it into something that reflects that. And what I would say, just on the point you've made there around flags going up in an area where maybe they're being erected by a minority, we are all minorities here in Northern Ireland now, and if we are going to move forward again under the principles of the Good Friday Agreement and have that mutual respect, then we have to provide space and time for people who may be from an Orange Order background or a GAA background, and I'm happy to give an example of that in my own constituency recently. Shared space doesn't mean neutral space for me, but again it has to be done in a way that's respectful, that is not excessive in time, and that in a way that there's transparency around who put them up and clarity about when they're coming down, and that would be the purpose of the online portal. So,
yeah, whenever I refer to minority there, I'm not talking about a minority community per se. I'm talking about a minority, a very, very small group within a community, and that are the people that are taking responsibility for putting up these flags, probably creating as much dissension within their own community, who would resent that type of approach to the whole flags issue and so on. But again, too, I'm sure you'd agree with me that till we get to that stage that we have political buy-in, and I mean political buy-in by all parties, rather than them burying their heads in the sand and pretending that this isn't an issue, we won't really get to that point of where we do have progress on the likes of the whole flags issue.
well, no, look, I am very frustrated, and I do agree with you. And as I say, I've got examples there of all political parties expressing concern, and as I mentioned in my opening remarks there, the issue of the billboard, that that would be covered in my bill as well, so that the department must go in, or there's a presumption that they must go in. But look, I think that we have to move on for that, and again I hope that I have struck the balance, that members will see that it's not just about trying to neutralise public space, but provide a legal framework upon which everyone can express their cultural identity, but that there's transparency around it.
And my final point just being that maybe you talk about public space, we really are referring maybe there to shared space that you do have now, I would say, even in town centres and the likes of it. Very often shared space that have been developed as a result of, we'll say, the local councils providing the funds and that to ensure that it is shared space. And that's one area that in particular one should be addressing there. But I also asked the question, whenever I look around, that I would say this year in particular, I've never seen as many flags as what has appeared in a whole lot of towns, and I keep asking the question, I wonder where all this money's coming from, and are they put up these flags, because this isn't done for nothing either, but as I say, a perennial issue that I've been involved in for a long number of years, much greater than 9 years in all honesty and all respect, but that I'm sure that it'll be there for a long number of years in the future as well too, until parties actually grasp the nettle and say, a better future is there for all of us, and we should take this on board and recognise and respect each other.
Okay, well, sorry, I should have clarified. I started working on the bill 9 years ago. I've been elected representative since 2014, so it's certainly in terms of my inbox, it's been an issue that's been there. But look, you're right, there are parts of the bill there that specify one site, one sort of location over another in terms of communal spaces. But there are areas, like I have one estate in my area in Beaver, where there's again a mixed relationship, mixed marriage, and there was a woman who's from a Catholic background, and there's a flag outside her house, and she says, I don't want it to be taken down because then people will identify that I live there. So that's why I've included the clause around excessive period of time, so that, for example, they're not up all year round, that people can say, yes, I understand why they're up for cultural expression, the 12th, the marching season, but I don't want that there in the midst of winter when it's tattered and torn and only hanging on maybe by one clip, you know. So I think that's why the bill, in my opinion, is balanced and gives account of different scenarios when people will maybe be frustrated that flags are up for an excessive period of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Militia. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paula, for coming today. Just a bit of clarity at the start. Is it now the case that you're not proposing to have like what's been referred to as a Parades Commission type body? Is that correct?
Yeah, I met with the Parades Commission on a couple of occasions. As I said to the chairman at the start in his questions, you know, I don't want this to be incredibly bureaucratic and incredibly time consuming for individuals, and that's why the online portal would be a voluntary way in which people could say we're putting them up. In other words, they're going up, there's the length of the Ormer Road or whatever, but this is why we're putting them up, and this is what we're trying to celebrate. So it would not be mandatory at all. We don't want to set up another body. You know, obviously the legislation relating to the Parades Commission was passed in Westminster, so we would have to get an amendment to that, etc. So no, I certainly don't want to go down that way. All I'm trying to do is something that is practical, workable, but it's also clear and transparent, so everybody understands what's involved.
And just linking in a wee bit to that around the updates to the Terrorism Act, which you'll be aware of, alongside the PSNI's new service instruction, which was announced earlier this year, where it talks about responding to complaints about public displays. So I suppose I'm keen to establish your thoughts on that as well. And do those developments at all, do they negate the need for your bill, do you feel, in any way?
No, so you'll see that very little of my bill is actually linked to prescribed organisations, flags of prescribed organisations, although we've obviously put it up front and centre in clause 1.1. But it's a welcome development in terms of the new crime and policing section that will come into force here in terms of updating the Terrorism Act, because up until now the police have only been able to, in practice, been able to take flags down from prescribed organisation for the purposes of evidence. So now they will be able to take them down on the basis that they feel that they're intimidated and you know, antagonistic, etc. So and illegal. So it in many ways rose in behind, complements, you know, sits alongside what we are doing here. But this is really about shared space, and it's about all flags that in any other walk of life, national flags, pride flags, sporting organisations that in themselves are perfectly legitimate, and they have a respect by everybody or certain sections of society. So this is really just about how those flags are able to be displayed in a way that is, again, sensitive to the need to reflect everybody's rights.
So just for clarity, you would envisage all flags, as you've mentioned there, sports, you give an example there of quite a range.
Yeah.
So that's very much your view on that and vision, that it's everything. And what about the emblems? You know, does that go into billboards, and how far does it go, I suppose?
Well, look, it's really just about the space that is owned and managed by the Department for Infrastructure primarily. So there would be the railing. So I think in the EFM, or certainly in the instructions to the drafter, I had said that you know, it's the posters, it's the bunting, it's the big banner across the road on a railing, it's the billboards, etc. It's really about people putting these up. That they can voluntarily say, actually, we've got to say a community festival, or I always give the example of the Breda GAC put the flags up. There was an All-Ireland final, put them up for 2 weeks, and they came down again. So people were like, what are these flags, where are they from? And then they said, well, actually, and once people heard, well, this is why they're up, then they were fair enough, because they knew they were coming down. So it would govern all aspects of communal life, really, you know, say whether it's a royal wedding or a sporting event, or even say Pride or some other event, maybe like an environmental project or something. It's really just to allow the a framework through which people can fly their flags and erect stuff in a public space.
And do you feel with your bill, the word is often used with bills, is any unintended consequences of the bill? You know, and do you think it could potentially distract away from the focus of potentially, you know, tackling the root of the problems, particularly around the paramilitary aspect, where paramilitary flags are in place, you know, and where the focus should be tackling the root of the problem, that paramilitaries ultimately don't exist anymore?
Well, I don't think it detracts at all. I think what my bill in many ways is trying to do is redress the balance that a lot of residents, business owners, etc., feel that they see these flags going up, they feel very frustrated. They're saying, who put them up? This is a mixed area, etc. I'm not going to repeat what I've said there. So in some ways, this is really about just saying and again, I've used the phrase there, a reasonable person test. So would a reasonable person say it'd be fine to put certain flags up over the summer? Yes, here's why. So it's really just about trying to take ownership back, take agency back for the people who live and work in those communities, as opposed to, as the previous question was, that a very small minority of people go into an area, put flags up, and then move along to the next, and they don't necessarily have a connection to that community.
Okay, and just final point then in terms of the consultation, I know you touched upon it earlier. Do you feel that you maybe were dismissive of some of the consultation replies because you may not have liked what they were saying?
No, as I say, whenever I set out, I was looking very much at the suggestion within the FICT Commission around, as you say, this notification system, that every single flag had to be notified and all the details had to be provided. And what I've done is say, actually, I will take account of that and through the online portal. But some of the other questions related to the duration, and again, people said actually our marching season's far longer than that, and I've said okay, so I'm not going to say I haven't included in the bill any stipulation say they can only fly for 1 month. I think that I have to respect and want the department to respect the fact that maybe some communities may say that the marching season is from June until September. So I have listened to the consultation feedback.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
Paula.
you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 quick questions from me, Paula. Firstly, I got to grips with FICT a couple of years ago. I think there was a debate previously in this assembly. Now, in that FICT report, it talks a lot about respect. It mentions respect. Yeah. And I'm minded of sitting in a coffee shop, I think last year, watching flags be removed in East Belfast. Mm-hmm. And the individuals who were doing it, clearly had to put them up as well, were ripping them from the lamppost and shoving them in a plastic bag. Mm-hmm. So how is respect reflected in your bill, or how are you mindful of respect, similar to the FICT report?
Yeah, no, as I said, there's a duty on the department to actually consult on a code of practice. And I'll just maybe pick up on the Chair's question earlier there. So I put who they have to in terms of government bodies and statutory agencies, but I would imagine that they will probably put that out to public consultation as well. But the respect piece would sit inside that code of practice, and that would be very much a guiding principle in terms of the decision making of the department. As I say, that then flows from the respect piece in the Good Friday Agreement that set up this place. So I think that I really think that if we can start from that premise, where it's respect for the flag that isn't up for a long time, allowed to become tattered, respect for the community in which it's up, so that it's not up excessive, but also for the occasion, that it's done in a respectful way. I keep using the word respectful, but it's done in a way that actually people understand that this is for celebration and it's not for demarcation.
And certainly, secondly, now my question would be to touch on Stephen's point. As a sitting member of the policing board, mm-hmm. Who's spoken with the Deputy Chief Constable about the service instruction, and I think that was well intended from him whenever they brought that out. But at the last policing board, we were hearing that although you've got that service instruction for officers, DFI needs to play ball with the police. I don't think that's taking place, and I think we saw initially quite good work in terms of removal of clearly contentious paraphernalia. I think it was Rathcoole at the time. It was shoulder height as well, but whenever you get ladders being involved, cherry pickers, you need DFI. Yeah. Have you had any engagement with DFI in terms of if there's maybe an appetite for something more, something like your bill?
Well, I suppose, yes, I've met with DFI officials and the ministers in the past. I think what I want to do, and this is the reason for this bill, is to give absolute clarity around whose responsibility it is, and I am placing the responsibility with the department, and give them then the permission or the clause there that if they need assistance from the PSNI, that they would seek that, and that would become available, because I think that the more we can make this look like a roads issue, because as we know, there are flags sometimes and emblems and banners that are hung in a way that you think, gosh, that is so hazardous. And again, the online portal portal would allow people to say, look, I have no problem with the flag, but it's hanging off. You know, there's some on the Westlink sometimes, you think if that came off in the lorries, somebody will get killed. So I think that the bill is really just to give full clarity around responsibilities to DFI, and that the support could come in from the police. But again, I think that if the bill passed, and obviously if the committee were to shape it, there could be a way that, you know, the issues that are raised and the duties in it can actually be tightened up a wee bit to give even more clarity.
Flags is obviously a bigger issue than ever, I think, in East Belfast,
Yeah.
specifically my constituency. And I had an FOI sent from a constituent where flags appeared that had never appeared before in East Belfast. And he put through an FOI, and the response from the FOI said that DFI hadn't removed any flags at all in 24, 25 or the duration of 26. So none have been removed across Northern Ireland from their street furniture. So I think for that reason, clarity is really important. I'm minded of another area in East Belfast whereby flags are erected by people who aren't from this particular street. They're not from that particular part of East Belfast either. And residents conducted their own survey, and 87% of residents don't want the flags on their street. There's been engagement with those who put them up. I'll not get into the stories that I've heard about that and the engagement that I've personally had. But it's just about that piece of clarity for people to know who's putting them up, how long for. I'm not against cultural celebrations. Who's putting them up, how long for, why they're going up. That's all people want. Clarity, and I think that's what your legislation will seek to achieve. Just very much so, lastly now, I've just gone through what you've just gone through in terms of presenting to the committee. Unfortunately, we're not proceeding to that call for evidence, which you're hopeful, I'm sure, to achieve. That'll go to your vote after you're finished. What would you say to the committee in terms of that and the importance of that call for evidence stage, similar to the autism bill and similar to the regional balance bill as well?
Well, I suppose you've given examples there. Look, as I said in my remarks, we've had 2 prolonged periods of suspension, one of them within this. So we had a shortened mandate of 3 years. I don't think that this committee or I would be in this position of worrying about the remaining weeks. I think that there's 13 meetings, well, certainly for our committee and the Committee for the Executive Office once we get back. That's not a long time. You know, if you go out for a call for evidence for 8 weeks and then you're starting to try and do your committee scrutiny stage. So there's a practicality issue around it. And then, as you say, there's a fairness that other bills have been able to go out to consultation. I personally, and obviously I would say, I think that there is balance in this. I don't think it's as contentious as people probably thought that I would bring, and I genuinely think that if people actually looked at how it would flow, and then hopefully people would see that it would have merit then in being allowed to be further scrutinised at second stage, after second stage.
Thank you, Paul.
But sorry, can I just come back to your previous point there around the FOI? So I have seen a previous one for preceding number of years from the department. I think that they've removed maybe 1 or 2 because they were hazardous. But there's also information there about how many times they consulted the police and there's been no action off the back of that. And I think that's an indictment. And another reason why we would need this is because when people are bringing forward legitimate concerns about flags going up that they are frustrated about, etc., that there's no action, then I think that there is an imbalance there, that it never goes on the side of those people who don't want them up, and it's always on the side of those people who do. And I think that this bill will hopefully balance that out.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. Paul, I just had one more thing just to ask, and it is in terms of the bill. So it's section 1. It's 1.3 A. My understanding, and again, as I said, obviously this is the first sight that we've had. Yes. It hasn't got the second, hasn't been debated, and so on and so on. My understanding is that a fair amount of onus is put on the Department for Infrastructure. I suspect that's why you're here and not in TO in terms of what the onus puts on within infrastructure. For the purpose of this act, there's a presumption that it's in the public interest to remove a flag or emblem if in the opinion of the department, one or more of the following applies, and you've got an A, B, C there. So I want to focus on just that in the opinion of the department, and also then the A, the flag or emblem is offensive, abusive, or insulting. So that is in the opinion of the department, is the way that clause is constructed. So it's in the opinion of the department if a flag or emblem is offensive, abusive, or insulting. Would I be right so far?
Yes, but then it goes on, then it says that presumption then is rebutted that they must consider, and then the clause is under 4. That's when that comes in.
I see that. But ultimately the decision is a decision of the Department for Infrastructure as to whether or not, bearing in mind the clause, it's clause 4, isn't it? Yeah, clause 4. So.
Sorry, 1-4, yeah.
Yeah, 1-4. So it is in the opinion of the department whether or not it's offensive, abusive, or insulting. Okay. Will those terms be defined? Because I suspect if you went around this committee, you would have a range of views, perhaps, on flags as to whether something was offensive to them in one way or another. Yeah. So, how are you going to plan to sort of deal with that, or is that? It's not my job to stand up for the DFI minister, it's my job to scrutinise her. But if this was law tomorrow, at some point, the minister would have to look at this with regard to 1-4 and go, well, that flag is offensive, that flag's not.
Yeah.
And that's quite a sort of varies to put on the minister.
Well, I wouldn't imagine that clause would be is directly related to national flags, for example, because, as I say, we all should be respecting everybody's national flags. That clause is probably more in relation to the likes of billboards or posters that we have seen put up that are very, very racist in nature, and very, against one political party. I think there's something in the last 24 hours. But again, the decision making, similar to the the Parades Commission, the code of practice would be the guiding principles around this, to look at that. And again, the consultation would tease that out in terms of what that actually meant. But I think that the reason why I've kept it within the Department for Infrastructure, because you say there's a good relations duty in the Executive Office, is because this is what I want to do is move this away from this sort of binary approach that we take to so many things, and be about the public interest. What should happen with our street furniture to keep them safe and to keep our public spaces free for everybody to enjoy and visit? So I think that the best people to have responsibility for managing this should be the department who own and manage these structures.
Listen, Paula, thank you so much for coming in today and presenting. It's not my. No, he's not. There's no Justin on my I'm only joking. Justin, way to go.
Of course. Paul, thanks for coming in. Thanks for your evidence and for the intent of your bill. What is the data that you possess in relation to the status quo, whereby there are flags and emblems located in particular areas? What is the status quo? Which areas have a prevalence of what flags and emblems, memorials? Yeah. Do you have data to show where these are erected, where they are legally erected, and what the implications are on house prices, for example, of flags and illegal emblems being erected?
Okay, well, first of all, none of the flags are up legally at the minute. Okay, so and that's what I'm saying earlier, that there's not actually there's a grey area in this space. So yeah, I think that there are some academic studies that would show that there is a correlation between those areas that would see a lot of flags and those that wouldn't in terms of house prices. That's not necessarily what I'm trying to achieve here per se. And I just would pick up another point. This is not about memorials, okay? So it's certainly not about memorials. I've purposefully avoided that issue because I think that would need a standalone bill on its own. So I don't have the data, but obviously the Life and Time survey would go out frequently and ask questions around this, and there would be leaning towards people saying that they would like their public spaces to be free from flags. But as I said, my bill is not about that. My bill is about trying to strike a balance between those people who want to put them up and those who don't.
You did mention billboards. What was the billboard you were referencing?
Well, it was the one that this committee have considered before in terms of was it Sinn Féin, or there was a contest over whether it was Sinn Féin. It's really just about that where people were wanting to erect such billboards in land that's owned and managed by the Department for Infrastructure, that they would they could, but if they didn't, and that the department, on the basis of the clauses and the code of practice, felt that in some ways it was actually creating tensions within a community, were not good community relations, then they would be removed.
And does the bill include, for example, posters that are up 24/7, 365 a year? In South Armagh, there's a poster at every junction in the road, every gap and hedge, almost by Sinn Féin, 24/7, 365 days of the year,
Yeah.
marking their territory and saying this is ours, this is our space.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So does this bill include for that?
This is about flags and emblems, and that's why I haven't just gone for display of flags. I have said flags and emblems, so that, and again, there's it's a list, but we thought that was the neatest two terms. And so it would be up to, as I say, the online portal is not just about people voluntarily notifying that they were putting them up or have put them up, but it's also would allow people then the opportunity to express views on those, and that then would trigger then the department to look at those with the presumption that they would remove them unless there are local views to say that they wanted them to stay up, etc.
It will be the department's responsibility to remove those
Yes.
illegal propaganda points.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily call them propaganda, but yes, so anything like that where people have expressed a view on the online portal that they felt that these had gone up in some ways to create an illusion of a dominance of one political party support or cultural identity or national identity, then that would certainly fall under this.
Thank you, Justin. And with that, Stephanie, Paula,
Thank you so
okay, thank you so much for your time, for coming to the committee.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay.
Counting people, aren't you?
So look, vote now. That was very interesting. Okay, so that was the evidence from Paula on her consultation. Obviously, we have the act there in tabled papers. Again, similar to what we had last time, the only thing that remains for us in terms of this committee is whether or not we take a call for evidence now, or we take the call for evidence once this bill passes second stage and is referred to this committee. Are we content to have another vote on this? Is that what people want to do? I think it was Michael, certainly you indicated. I think
Yes.
we're in a similar sort of territory.
Unless there's consensus in the committee to go one way or the other, a vote would be.
Yeah, it probably makes it just a wee bit cleaner. Okay, let's do that. So, again, it's with me. So I propose that the committee waits until the bill, you've got the title there, Flags and Emblems Bill. Flags and Emblems Bill passes second stage.
Display of flags and emblems.
Display of Flags and Emblems Bill passes second stage and is referred to committee to take the call for evidence.
Members, sorry Melissa, just to say that we're taking a vote whether or not to the question put is to wait until the display of flags and emblems has passed second stage and been referred to this committee before issuing a call for evidence, the same question as the previous one. So the ayes, if they would like to raise their hands. Okay, so the chair, Mr. Dunn, Mr. McHugh and Ms. Ennis, and the noes, Mr. McNulty, Mr. McMurray, Mr. McReynolds, and abstentions there. That's everyone. So there are four for the question and 3 against. So the question is passed by the committee.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, so that concludes 8, in which case we will move on to 9, which is the Harbours Bill, which has passed second stage, as we all know. And we have consideration of the draft bill timetable. I'll take members at page 613 for that timetable. At 616 is the RAISE review of costs. At table papers at 109 is the Harbours Bill draft timetable. And just to inform members that the committee staff have prepared a draft timetable for members' consideration in respect of its scrutiny of the bill. Members agreed at its last meeting that a stakeholder list was created by RAISE and would be used to target responses for the committee's call for evidence. Members will wish to note that the draft timetable schedules oral evidence from the relevant ports in September to allow committee staff to coordinate with each organisation in terms of maximising committee's time on this. At this point in time, I just need to seek any views on the draft timetable and in terms of scheduling of that oral evidence. Do members have any views on that? Well, sounds like a no. Okay. In which case, I would therefore like to seek committee agreement to note the draft timetable and proceed as outlined in September. Our committee agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. Right. Item 10, SL1s. SL1, the parking places, disabled persons' vehicles, amendment number 3, Northern Ireland Order 2026, initial consideration. At page 642 is the clerk's memo. Page 643 is the SL1, and pages 648 to 652 are documents that relate to that SL1. The SR is not subject to assembly procedure. The rule will authorise parking places with unlimited waiting for disabled persons by adding parking places with unlimited waiting in Antrim 1 Bay, Arglass 1 Bay, Balnahinch 1 Bay, Cardlock 1 Bay, Castlewellan 1 Bay, Londonderry 1 Bay, Doak 1 Bay, Downpatrick 2 bays, Island Magee 2 bays, Larne 3 bays, Mackerfelt 1 bay, and the Newton Abbey coming out massively on top with 6 bays. In addition, it will remove parking places with unlimited waiting in Londonderry 2 bays and substitute a new description for lengths of roads in Mackerfelt to create the parking place in Mackerfelt. Vehicles are accepted from the prohibitions in certain circumstances. I need to seek committee agreement to note the receipt of this SL1 and the proposed SR. This will be published as part of a call for views. To agree that the SL1 will be considered by this committee on the 9th of September and to indicate that we are currently content that a briefing from officials is not required at this stage. Our committee content?
Yes.
Item 11, SL1, the Cycle Routes Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2026 formal consideration. At page 654 is the clerk's memo. 655 is the SL1 and 658 to 661 are documents that relate to that SL1. The SR is not subject to procedure before the Assembly. The rule will provide a two-way shared cycle track on a length of the Tranmillis Embankment in Belfast and aims to promote active modes of transport whilst improving pedestrian safety. The committee's call for views closed on the 16th of June 26 and received no responses. No specific issues have been identified with the SR as drafted. Are members content with the SR? Yep.
Yeah.
Item 12, SL1, the parking places on roads and waiting restrictions, Dungannon, Northern Ireland 2026, formal consideration. At page 663 is the clerk's memo. At page 664 is the SL1, and at pages 668 to 684 are documents that relate to that SL1. The SR is not subject to any procedure before the Assembly. The rule will increase the maximum length of time vehicles may wait in certain places in Dungannon from 1 hour to 2 hours, and also increase the length of time that must expire before a vehicle can return to that parking place. The SR will revoke and reenact certain existing car parking spaces and places and waiting restrictions in Dungannon, thereby consolidating the existing SRs into one rule. The committee's call for views closed on the 16th of June 2026 and received no responses. No specific issues have been identified with the SR as drafted. Are members content with the proposal for the SR? Yes. Item 13, SR 2026-123, the road races Eagle Rock Hill Climb Order, Northern Ireland 2026. At page 686 is the business office letter. At page 687 is the maid order. The rule is not subject to assembly procedure and is not required to be laid. There have been no changes to policy content since the SL1 was considered by this committee on the 17th of June 2026. Are members content to note the statutory rule? Yes. Okay. Folks, we're going to consider the bill, and so the committee will now move into closed session.